Chapter 44-77. 360 battleships remained in the sky, forming a formation that could attack and defend. Of the 80,000 soldiers, 60,000 were mobilized. They formed an offensive formation within the battle formation formed by the fleets and began to attack. The offensive power of the Hanya fleet instantly increased by 3 times. The 360 battleships released tens of thousands of pillars of God power every 2 breaths, raining down on the formation of the Qin Yu hull. The 60,000 soldiers continued to use their abilities, releasing a sky full of blade lights, sword shadows, lightning, and flames. Endless magical powers and magic arts poured down like a torrential flood, drowning the more than 10,000 people of the Pure Moon Hall. The master of Qin Yu Hall was a little shocked, not expecting the Hanya fleet to still have such terrifying combat power after fighting for so long. Amidst the shock, he did not forget to give orders, ordering the 13,000 elite citizens to quickly change their formation and defend. Even though they were all exhausted and their combat power had decreased by a lot, the battle had already begun. However, the decisive battle had already begun, and the 13,000 civilians had no choice but to do their best to conjure up a massive defensive shield. At the same time, the master of Qin Yu Hall controlled the Desolate Era scroll, gathering the heaven and earth power within 1,000,000 miles to form a sky-covering barrier. The 2 protectors and the Grand Elder also used all their strength to block the attacks of the Hanya fleet. In the next instant, the sky-covering divine techniques, wind, fire, and lightning smashed into the giant barrier and shield. A loud rumbling sound burst out, reverberating endlessly between the heavens and the earth. The ground within 100,000 miles shook intensely, countless cracks appearing. Many mountains collapsed, and forests were destroyed into ruins. The berserk shockwaves spread out in all directions, forming ring after ring of 5-colored ripples. The surrounding mountains and rivers all collapsed into ruins under the berserk shockwaves. From the start of this battle, it was destined that it would not end in a short amount of time. In order to win, both sides did not hold back, going all out. Time passed silently, but the battlefield was fixed there, not moving at all. Rumble. The loud rumbling sound was incessant and had never stopped. The destructive 5-colored shockwaves continued to spread in all directions, circle after circle, never stopping. As time passed, the attacking rhythm of the Hanya fleet did not change, and their fighting strength did not weaken by much. On the other hand, it was obvious that the people of Qin Yu Hall didn't have enough divine power. The 2 sides had been fighting for 2 hours. Most of the soldiers' strength had been severely depleted and could not be replenished quickly. It was difficult for them to continue. If it weren't for the master of Qin Yu Hall holding the remote antiquity long scroll and the 2 guardians and the Grand Elder holding the 3 divine weapons, the people of Qin Yu Hall would have been defeated in large numbers. Of course, the master of Qin Yu Hall had already thought of a countermeasure. Compared to the Prajna fleet, the people of Qin Yu Hall were more agile and flexible. They could retreat in time if they saw that the situation was not good. As long as they returned to 7 Moon Mountain, the Hanya fleet would not be able to do anything to them. Apart from that, the master of Qin Yu Hall also asked the elders under him to send message jade slips to the other hall masters, reporting the cause of the matter. This way, when the battle reached the most dangerous moment, if the Qin Yu Hall could not win against the Prajna fleet, they could use the Kongming Temple to suppress the Prajna fleet. The master of Qin Yu Hall believed that the commander of the Prajna fleet would have reported the situation to the Prajna god emperor long ago. This was indeed the case. During the battle, Marshal Zhua took the time to send a message jade slip, telling the Prajna god emperor the most detailed and true situation. At the same time, the headquarters of the faraway Kongming godly palace was located in a secret realm that had seized the fortune of heaven and earth. Within the secret realm, which was hundreds of thousands of miles wide, there was the densest divine power of heaven and earth, and the richest treasures. All kinds of cultivation resources could be found everywhere. This was one of the most suitable places in the world for cultivation. Staying in this mystic realm, even if it was an ant or a bird, they would be able to gain sentience and cultivate to the Divine Lord realm. It could not be helped. The planet of origin was the origin of the entire universe and the source of power. And this secret realm was one of the rarest secret realms on the planet of origin. In the depths of the secret realm, there was a mountain range with hundreds of majestic palaces and tall buildings. Around each palace and tall building, there were large groups of divine kings and divine lords patrolling and guarding. The palaces and buildings were also luxurious and magnificent, exuding a sacred aura. In the depths of the palaces, in an exquisite and elegant palace, the Prajna God Emperor and Divine King Chi Xia were drinking tea in the study, chatting with a calm expression. Even though there were defensive and secret formations set up in the study and 8 Divine King Realm Guards outside the study, the Divine King Realm Guards didn't dare to attack. But the conversation between the master and disciple might involve some secrets and words that outsiders could not hear. Therefore, the Prajna God Emperor was careful with his words and actions, and set up 2 more secret arrays before speaking. The secret realm where the Kongming Temple is located is indeed blessed by the heavens and the most suitable place for cultivation. If you can cultivate in seclusion here for 100 years, you will have a great chance of comprehending the mysteries of the heavenly Tao and breaking through to the God Emperor level. Divine King Chi Xia nodded and said with a smile, "We have already arrived at the Kongming Temple's divine palace. We will rest today and see the temple masters tomorrow. When the Kongming Temple has prepared the corresponding ceremony, Master will be able to represent everyone to join the Kongming Temple and become the 6th Temple Master by the day after tomorrow at the latest. As long as Master becomes the Temple Master, I will have many opportunities to come here in the future." Although she did not say it explicitly, her meaning was obvious. In the future, the Prajna God Emperor would most likely stay here as the 6th Temple Master. As the disciple of the Prajna God Emperor, it was only natural that she would serve her master and cultivate in seclusion in this secret realm for a few hundred years. The Prajna God Emperor nodded slightly, her expression as calm as ever, but a hint of worry flashed through her eyes. Logically speaking, everything has gone smoothly since we came into contact with the Qin Yu Hall. There have not been any problems or errors. Master will join the Kongming Temple tomorrow at the latest and become the 6th Temple Master. But I don't know why, but I have a vague feeling that something bad is about to happen. The Prajna God Emperor had already grasped 3 strands of Tao. Although she was still at the initial stage of the God Emperor level, she was not far from the middle stage of the God Emperor level. She had also formed a sufficient connection with the heavenly Tao, so it was natural for her to feel something. Divine King Chi Xia also understood that her master would not say such things for no reason. But she still smiled and comforted her master. "Master, there is no need to worry. The Qin Yu Hall has been very warm and polite to us. Marshal Zhua and Marshal Shi will also follow your orders and supervise the soldiers. They will not have any conflicts with the Qin Yu Hall." Chapter 4478. From Chi Xia's point of view, the Qin Yu Hall's attitude was very respectful, and they definitely wouldn't cause trouble. The 2 marshals would also follow the orders of the Prajna God Emperor and strictly watch over all the soldiers, not allowing them to go out. In this way, there would be no conflict between the 2 sides. Then where did Master's worries come from? The Prajna God Emperor was silent, as if she was sensing the mysteries of heaven and guessing the source of the unease. Chi Xia continued, "There shouldn't be any problems between the fleet and the Qin Yu Hall. The only thing that could cause Master to feel uneasy should be the Kongming Temple, right? Could it be that the Temple Lords have different opinions and someone wants to stop us from joining?" The Prajna God Emperor sensed for a moment, but the mysteries of heaven were still a bit vague. She couldn't find the source, so she simply stopped thinking about it. Hearing Chi Xia's words, she thought seriously and nodded slightly. After thinking about it, this is probably the only possibility. But the 2nd Temple Lord said that the other Temple Lords wanted to invite us to join the Kongming Temple. Because he was from the Flood tribe, he was sent as a representative to talk to me. In that case, the temple lords have no reason to trick me and then refuse us. Qi Xia was speechless. He could only comfort her with a smile. Master, it's most likely because you've been overworked and worried. That's why you're worried. Have a good rest. When you see the temple lords tomorrow, everything will be clear. The Prajna god emperor felt that this was a possibility, so she didn't dwell on it. Following this, she planned to bring godly monarch Crimson Afterglow around the mystic realm to take a look at its environment. After all, it was very likely that she would be overseeing this place for a long time. But at that moment, a transmission jade slip flew from the sky and stopped in front of her. Looking at the special communication jade slip that was glowing with golden light, Emperor God Pan Ju frowned and his heart skipped a beat. She recognized it at a glance. It was the transmission jade slip she had left for the two marshals. There were only 3 of them, and they were used for emergency communication. They were extremely confidential. If it was a normal communication, the two marshals wouldn't use it so easily. Since the two marshals used special jade slips, it meant that there must be something important or news. For the current Hanya God Emperor, the two marshals urgently contacting her was definitely not a good thing. Crimson Afterglow thought of the same thing. His pupils constricted as he stared at the jade slip. He thought to himself, it can't be, right? Did something happen to the fleet? The Prajna God Emperor was shrewd and magnanimous enough. Without changing his expression, he picked up the communication jade slip and read its contents with his divine sense. Marshall's voice rang in her mind. That low and somewhat hoarse voice was urgently and solemnly narrating a matter. The Ban Ruo God Emperor's expression changed on the spot. His beautiful face became frosty, and his eyes flashed with anger and killing intent. Seeing his master's reaction, Crimson Afterglow's heart skipped a beat. She'd already guessed that something must have happened to the fleet. It might even have something to do with the Qin Yu hull. There was a conflict and dispute between the two sides. Otherwise, his master's expression wouldn't be so ugly. 100 breaths later, the Ban Ruo God Emperor finished listening to Marshall's message. The Ban Ruo God Emperor had a thorough understanding of what had happened between the fleet and the Qin Yu hull, as well as the details of what had happened and the current situation. Her expression was frosty, and her eyes were as sharp as swords. She put away the jade slip and slowly raised her head to look at Crimson Afterglow. At this moment, she exuded an awe-inspiring majesty. The fury and killing intent in her eyes made one's heart palpitate. Crimson Afterglow couldn't help but tremble under his master's fierce gaze. Master. What's the matter? Why are you looking at your disciple like that? Crimson Afterglow felt an instinctive fear and panic. The Ban Ruo God Emperor didn't explain in detail. She only said 2 simple sentences. Feiyang Shenhuang took the lead in causing trouble. They left the fleet with their soldiers and went out to plunder cultivation resources and treasures. They had a conflict with the people of Qin Yu hull and started killing each other. Since lives were lost, the Qin Yu hull naturally wouldn't let the matter rest. The situation became more and more intense, and now it's an all-out war. More than 10,000 people have died. Crimson Afterglow froze on the spot, as if she'd been struck by lightning. This news was too shocking. She'd never thought that the source of her master's uneasiness was the conflict between the fleet and the Qin Yu hull. She'd never thought that the conflict would arise because of Feiyang Shenhuang, and that it would escalate to such an extent that the two sides would fight each other to the death. This was too absurd. It was so absurd that she couldn't believe it. Her mind went blank. After a long time, she finally came to her senses. She finally understood why her master was so angry and her gaze so fierce. It couldn't be helped. The main culprit was Feiyang Shenhuang. Before the Ban Ruo God Emperor left the fleet, she'd repeatedly ordered the 2 marshals not to allow the soldiers to go out. They were to stay in the divine warship and wait for her orders. However, Feiyang Shenhuang not only disobeyed her orders, but also incited the other soldiers to cause trouble. The reason why he had the guts and confidence to go against the two marshals was because of her trust and high regard. In the eyes of the two marshals, Feiyang Shenhuang was her confidant. They didn't dare to offend him, so they could only acquiesce. In short, Feiyang Shenhuang deserved to die, but she couldn't get away with it. Crimson Afterglow's forehead broke out in cold sweat at this thought. She couldn't wait to find Feiyang Shenhuang and cut him into 1,000 pieces. However, this was impossible. She also believed that with Feiyang Shenhuang's strength, he would have died in the battle long ago. Even if Feiyang Shenhuang didn't die, the two marshals who were about to go crazy would probably turn him into ashes. Plop, without hesitation, Crimson Afterglow knelt in front of the Ban Ruo God Emperor and kowtowed in fear and trepidation. Please calm your anger, Master. This disciple was blind and didn't know the right person. This led to such a disaster and caused irreparable losses. This disciple is guilty and should be punished. Master, please punish me severely. Crimson Afterglow had followed the Ban Ruo God Emperor for thousands of years. She knew her master's nature very well. At this time, the more she quibbled, refuted, and shirked responsibility, the angrier her master would be and the worse the punishment would be. On the other hand, if she took the initiative to admit her guilt and ask for punishment without quibbling or shirking responsibility, it would calm her master down. Most importantly, she was her master's most valued disciple. Her master treated her as her own daughter and would never really punish her. As expected, Crimson Afterglow's actions were very wise. The Ban Ruo God Emperor took a deep breath and suppressed his anger. He looked at the prostrating Crimson Afterglow expressionlessly and said in a low voice, "The situation has developed. Now the soldiers are fighting a bloody battle with the people of Qinyu Hall. What's the use of blaming someone at this time? Get up. After I settle this matter, I will punish you." Chapter 44-79. Since the Prajna God Emperor had decided not to punish Qi Xia for the time being, Qi Xia had escaped this calamity. Even if her master were to punish her after this, her anger would have dissipated with the passage of time and would not be too severe. Qi Xia secretly heaved a sigh of relief, but at the same time, she felt vexed and regretful. She hated that she had listened to Feiyang Shenhuang's flowery words and had been tricked into trusting him, resulting in this disaster. Of course, now was not the time to blame herself. The most urgent matter at hand was to resolve the conflict between the fleet and Qinyu Hall. Seeing her master frowning in deep thought, Qi Xia hurriedly asked, "Master, what should we do now?" "Send orders to the two marshals and have them stop the attack immediately." The Prajna God Emperor raised an eyebrow and said coldly, "The people of Qinyu Hall pretend to be hospitable, but now they are fighting with my soldiers without any mercy. So what if the final battle begins? If there is to be a ceasefire, they should be the first to do so. Otherwise, if I ordered a ceasefire, it would make it seem like I was afraid of them. I have not even joined the Kongming Temple, yet I am already inferior to them. What kind of status will I have in the Kongming Temple in the future?" Qi Xia had overlooked this problem and was startled for a moment before nodding. "Master, you are right. It has always been the people of Kongming Temple begging us to join, not the other way around. Those people of Qinyu Hall clearly know that you are about to become the 6th Hall Master, yet they still dare to act so forcefully. They clearly do not respect you. Since that is the case, let them continue to fight. I believe that when the people of Qinyu Hall cannot hold on, they will definitely report to the Hall Masters. When that time comes, the Hall Masters will definitely reprimand the Master of Qinyu Hall and order them to stop the attack." Thinking of the Kongming Temple's attitude and the fact that they had invited them to join the temple, Qi Xia Deity King felt that they had an advantage. Regardless of whether it was to protect his master's dignity or because he was angry at Qinyu Hall, it was impossible for his master to order the soldiers to stop first. In any case, the soldiers were extremely powerful and had the upper hand at the moment. They definitely wouldn't lose to the people of Qin Yu Hall. However, the Prajna God Emperor pondered for a moment, then shook his head and said, "But we can't drag this out for too long. When the two sides fight, there will definitely be soldiers who will be sacrificed." The people of Qin Yu Hall were all natives, so they could keep regenerating and multiplying. As for the 100,000 soldiers we brought with us, they won't be able to reproduce and strengthen in a short period of time. If more of them die, our strength will be even weaker. To put it simply, the people of Qin Yu Hall could afford to die, but the soldiers of Sanskrit fleet could not. Moreover, as more and more people died on both sides, the hatred would deepen to an irreconcilable level. If it really reached that point, it would depend on how the Kongming Temple would mediate. Perhaps she would no longer be able to join the Kongming Temple. At this thought, the Prajna God Emperor frowned, and his expression became even more gloomy. She had no choice but to release her divine sense to observe the surrounding temples, wanting to see how those temple masters would react. From their reactions, she could more or less determine whether or not they had received the news. However, 15 minutes later, the Prajna God Emperor discovered that everything around her was normal. Those temple masters didn't seem to know about this matter at all. As a result, she couldn't help but feel anxious and conflicted. Should she find the temple masters and explain the situation, have them give Qin Yu Hall an order to have Qin Yu Hall immediately stop fighting? In reality, the Prajna God Emperor didn't know that the temple masters had just received a message from the master of Qin Yu Hall. Apart from the fifth temple master, the other four temple masters all knew about the battle between the Qin Yu Hall and the Prajna fleet. At this moment, the four temple masters were in their respective divine palaces, but they were secretly communicating with each other through a secret array, urgently discussing countermeasures. The first temple master, who had the highest status and the strongest strength, was one of the primordial beings born on the planet of origin. His true form was a mass of chaotic purple gas. However, the image he normally presented to the public was that of a golden-faced man who was more than 10 feet tall and had 2 heads and 4 arms. He had a tower-like figure and a domineering, broad face like a lion. He wore gray armor and a pitch-black cloak all year round. He sat in his study, gazing at the black mirror stone in front of him. He coldly looked at the 3 temple masters and said in a low voice, "You should have all seen the message sent by the master of Qin Yu Hall, right?" The wash-basin-sized black mirror stone shone with white light, displaying 3 images, displaying the situation of the 3 temple masters. The second temple master was also in his study, leaning against a wide chair, rubbing his forehead in distress. The third temple master was sitting in a secret chamber with a gloomy face, deep in thought. As for the fourth temple master, he was sitting upright in his room, expressionless. No one could tell what he was thinking. Seeing that everyone was silent and no one took the initiative to speak, the first temple master looked at the second temple master and said in a low voice, "Second temple master, we have all agreed to let you handle this matter. Now, something big has happened. The Qin Yu Hall and Pan Roa's fleet are locked in a fierce battle, and they have suffered heavy casualties. I would like to hear what you have to say." The second temple master smiled bitterly and said, "To be honest, I did not expect this to happen. Before leaving Mount Seven Moons, I told the master of Qin Yu Hall to restrain her people and not to cause trouble. Pan Roa also gave orders to her subordinates that they were not allowed to go out. However, for some reason, a portion of the soldiers under Hanya still slipped out. Those bastards left the fleet without permission, and they even wanted to mine resources and veins. They wanted to collect cultivation resources, and they even wanted to steal Qin Yu Hall's things. In my opinion, the cause of this matter is the soldiers under Pan Roa's command. Qin Yu Hall has indeed been wronged." After hearing his words, the third temple master frowned and expressed a different opinion. "Second temple master, please forgive me for not being able to agree. In my opinion, this is the master of Qin Yu Hall's dereliction of duty. He is too muddle-headed. You've already warned him not to cause any trouble. It's not like he doesn't understand how important it is for us to absorb the 100,000 soldiers under Pan Ruo's command. So what if Pan Ruo's soldiers are collecting resources and robbing them of their resources and treasures? Qin Yu Hall's territory is so big, and there is an endless supply of cultivation resources. Can they use it all up? In the past tens of thousands of years, the temple has given them a lot of cultivation resources and treasures. The master of Qin Yu Hall, that bastard, couldn't hold back because of a small conflict. In the end, it got out of hand, and he even used the Desolate Era scroll given by the temple. What a bastard. After a moment of silence, the fourth temple master said slowly, thousands of Qin Yu Hall's people died in battle. It's not a big deal. Anyway, the person we are looking for is not among them. However, so many of Pan Ruo's soldiers were killed. It is a huge loss to us. If the person we are looking for is among those soldiers, Qin Yu Hall has committed a grave crime. Chapter 4480. The master of Qin Yu Hall knowingly committed a crime, truly abominable to the extreme. After this matter is settled, we must severely punish them. The fourth palace master berated the master of Qin Yu Hall's crimes and was extremely indignant. But then he changed the topic and continued, however, how to punish the master of Qin Yu Hall can be discussed after this matter is settled. The most important thing right now is to have both sides stop fighting as soon as possible to prevent the situation from escalating. Moreover, we can't appear to be too impatient. That way, Bo Ri is definitely not a stupid person. Previously, when the second palace master personally went to Seven Moon Mountain to invite her, his attitude was rather intimate and warm. I'm afraid that she has already become suspicious. Now, if we order Qin Yu Hall to stop fighting, with her intelligence, she will definitely guess that we have something to ask of her. In the future, she will have the upper hand, and it will be very difficult for us to get her to cooperate. It was very clear that the Kongming Temple wanted to use the Bo Ri God Emperor and her tens of thousands of soldiers. But they also did not want the Bo Ri God Emperor to think that she and her soldiers were very important and could be used as bargaining chips to negotiate with the Kongming Temple. The palace masters were all silent, pondering how to deal with this thorny matter. They could not let the situation escalate, and they could not let the Bo Ri God Emperor see any clues. This was truly too difficult. In the end, it was the first palace master who made the decision. He said with a dignified tone, "Third palace master, fourth palace master, the two of you go find Bo Ri and explain this matter to her face to face. Then, you and her will give the order at the same time to order Qin Yu Hall and her fleet to stop fighting. As for who is right and who is wrong, we will wait until the temple investigates clearly before questioning them." The palace masters were all understanding people. They all knew that the responsibility lay with the soldiers of the Bo Ri fleet. But the first palace master said this to smooth things over, to give the Bo Ri God Emperor face and not be too strict. Big matters could be reduced to small matters, and small matters could be resolved. For that grand goal, the Kongming Temple could make appropriate concessions. The Prajna God Emperor was hesitating and weighing the pros and cons of whether or not he should seek out the palace masters. At this moment, her divine sense detected two God Emperors flying out from their respective divine palaces towards her. Since he was a God Emperor, there was no doubt that he was the temple master of the Kongming Temple. The Prajna God Emperor heaved a sigh of relief when he saw the two temple masters. In the end, it was the other party who couldn't keep their cool and came to negotiate a ceasefire. This was good too. No matter who spoke first, they would be able to settle this matter as soon as possible. Moments later, the two palace masters arrived at the gates of the divine palace. Naturally, the guards came to report to the Prajna God Emperor. Prajna God Emperor didn't waste any time. He hurriedly brought Crimson Afterglow to the guest hall to meet with the two hall masters. After the two sides met, it was inevitable for them to exchange greetings and introduce themselves. This was the first time the Prajna God Emperor had met the third and fourth hall masters. The two hall masters were very reserved, not as enthusiastic as the second hall master. After the greetings were over, the two hall masters got straight to the point. Prajna God Emperor, I presume you've already received the message from your soldiers and know what happened at Mount Seven Moons. Because of a few misunderstandings, the soldiers of your fleet and the people of Qin Yu Hall got into a conflict and began fighting. Neither side was able to restrain themselves, causing the conflict to escalate into a large-scale battle. The two hall masters spoke very bluntly, without the slightest hint of euphemism. The Prajna God Emperor frowned and expressionlessly asked, "This emperor already knows about this matter. Have the two hall masters come to find this emperor to denounce me?" Until she was clear about the attitudes and stances of the two hall masters, she naturally had to act tough and cold. The two hall masters hurriedly waved their hands and shook their heads, explaining, "Prajna God Emperor, you've misunderstood. The exact cause and process of the matter have yet to be investigated, so it's impossible to say who's right and who's wrong. Naturally, there's no need for us to denounce you. We are stationed here, far too far from Mount Seven Moons. There's no point in trying to determine who's right and who's wrong. We've come to ask for your opinion." The Prajna God Emperor's expression eased up a lot. She nodded slightly and said, "What do the two hall masters plan to do? There's no harm in speaking frankly." The third hall master replied straightforwardly, "Give the order at the same time as we do, ordering Qin Yu Hall and your soldiers to cease fighting." The fourth hall master quickly followed up with an explanation, because of a few misunderstandings and conflicts, causing such a large-scale battle and casualties is far too unwise. Moreover, you and the soldiers under your command are also part of the Temple of Emptiness. To have such internal strife is truly distressing, and it's a great loss to the temple. The last bit of worry in the Prajna God Emperor's heart dissipated. She nodded and said, "To tell you the truth, this emperor also has the same thoughts. I was just about to find you and discuss this matter with you." The two hall masters smiled and nodded in praise. The Prajna God Emperor is able to see the greater good and consider the bigger picture. This seat is deeply gratified. Since the matter has been discussed and you've agreed to cease fighting, we don't need to waste any more time. Let's send the order immediately. Everyone knew that every second they wasted meant more soldiers and civilians would be killed on the battlefield at Mount Seven Moons. There was no time to lose. Once the two sides reached an agreement, they immediately took out their communication jade slips and sent the order. Whoosh! The two hall masters took the lead in issuing the order. Their communication jade slips transformed into streams of light and quickly disappeared over the horizon. A moment later, the communication jade slips would reach the master of Qin Yu Hall. At this moment, the Prajna God Emperor also sent out two communication jade slips, one to Marshal Zhua and one to Marshal Shi. Whoosh! The communication jade slips flew out of the divine palace and quickly disappeared. The three looked at each other and smiled, their mood much better. The two hall masters bowed to the Prajna God Emperor and said with a smile, "Since we've reached an agreement on this matter, we'll let both sides rest after the ceasefire. Tomorrow, the temple will hold a ceremony to welcome you to the temple. Please make the necessary preparations. After you join the temple and work with us, we'll clean up the mess and investigate and deal with this matter." The Prajna God Emperor nodded in agreement. "Very well. I'll have to trouble the hall masters." After that, the two hall masters bowed and took their leave, leaving the divine palace. The Prajna God Emperor had Crimson Dawn send the guests off. She left the reception hall and returned to her study, where she quietly pondered. The third hall master and the fourth hall master clearly know that the cause of this matter is the soldiers under this emperor's command. But they didn't denounce us. Instead, they took the attitude of making a big deal out of a small one. They're giving this emperor a way out, and they want to settle this matter. It seems that the Kongming Temple is plotting something against this emperor and my soldiers, and they're plotting something big. The Prajna God Emperor secretly pondered. Then, she thought of the riddle of eternal life that the second hall master had mentioned before, and a bold idea emerged in her mind. The only thing that can make the Kongming Temple go through so much trouble and even swallow their anger is probably the riddle of eternal life. Could it be that, this emperor and my soldiers are the key to solving the riddle of eternal life? The Bookhouse Reading Website. Chapter 4481. After the Prajna God Emperor and the Hall Masters sent out the message, they waited in the Divine Palace for news and feedback. On the other side, the battle between the Prajna fleet and the Qin Yu Hall was still going on. There were only 11,000 people left in the Qin Yu Hall. They were still in a battle formation, relying on the Desolate Era Long Scroll and the 3 divine artifacts to share most of the pressure. Even so, the exhausted people of the Qin Yu Hall had lost most of their will to fight, and their combat strength had decreased greatly. However, they still couldn't withstand the counterattack of the Prajna fleet. More than 3,600 people had already been killed by the Prajna fleet. Every second, there were people who had used up all of their divine power and couldn't hold on any longer. They died tragically in the light pillars and sword shadows, their bodies smashed into pieces. The master of Qin Yu Hall, the 2 protectors, and the elders were also under great pressure. Their faces were pale, and their bodies were drenched in cold sweat. Although they weren't injured yet, they had used up a lot of their divine power. However, their divine power was greatly depleted, and their minds were also shaken and injured. Their battle prowess was gradually declining. Based on the current situation, they could at most hold on for another hour before they ran out of energy and retreated. At that time, the master of Qin Yu Hall, the protectors, and the elders wouldn't be able to hold on, and their people would be defeated. They could only choose to retreat to 7 Moon Mountain, and they would be chased by the Prajna fleet, suffering heavy casualties along the way. On the other hand, the Prajna fleet was still attacking at full strength. In the previous battle, only 10 divine warships were destroyed, and more than 800 soldiers were killed. For the entire fleet, this amount of casualties didn't matter. On the contrary, it ignited the bloodlust and killing intent of the tens of thousands of soldiers, causing their morale to soar. For a moment, Marshal Zhou didn't want to stop the battle. He had the urge to continue fighting and take over 7 Moon Mountain. However, he quickly calmed down. After weighing the pros and cons, he felt that there was no benefit in doing so. Instead, it would cause the relationship between the 2 sides to collapse. Therefore, the Prajna fleet had the upper hand, and it was best to reduce the casualties. When the Prajna God Emperor gave the order, he still had to follow it. In short, he had to make the Qin Yu Hall pay a heavy price, but he couldn't destroy the Qin Yu Hall. Even if the 2 sides reconciled in the future, the Qin Yu Hall would still have to lower their attitude in front of the Prajna fleet. The Prajna fleet had to be the victor, and Qin Yu Hall could only be the loser. Unknowingly, 15 minutes passed. The Prajna fleet's morale was Prajna fleet's army's soldiers' Hall army, and Qin Yu Hall's soldiers', and their morale was once again, their morale, the army's army's soldiers' army. Right at this time, 2 communication jade slips arrived at Sanskrit fleet at almost the same time, flying before Marshal left and Marshal Sure. Emperor God 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 Emperor Gods as God Emperors a God Emperor Emperor God 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 Emperoress and Lord S God of the God God at the of the God Emperor Emperor God God Halls. But the Prajna God Emperor naturally had her reasons for doing so. Furthermore, this would prove that she was fair and impartial, without any bias, and that she trusted both marshals. Marshal Sure was filled with anticipation. He opened the communication jade slip and listened to the orders of the God Emperor. He really wanted to know if the Prajna God Emperor was dissatisfied with Marshal Zhou, or even angry. Moreover, when he reported the situation before, he had already cleared his name and most likely would not be implicated. If the Prajna God Emperor was disappointed in Marshal Zhou and even ordered him to be severely punished, then he would be able to gain the trust and respect of the Prajna God Emperor. However, when Marshal Sure heard the Prajna God Emperor's message, he couldn't help but feel disappointed. The Prajna God Emperor only ordered the fleet to stop attacking and retreat to a safe distance to heal and comfort the soldiers. The Prajna God Emperor didn't say much about Marshall's mistake. She only said that the matter would be settled and the punishment would be carried out after the matter was investigated. Marshal was very smart. He understood a few things from the Prajna God Emperor's tone. First of all, the Prajna God Emperor was very angry and disappointed at this accident. But it had already happened. The Prajna God Emperor's focus wasn't on who caused the accident or who should be punished. What she cared more about was the attitude of the Qin Yu Hall and the outcome of this battle. Her point of view was very clear. Both sides could stop fighting, but only when the Prajna fleet had the upper hand. No matter what, she couldn't weaken her reputation and make her lose her status and prestige in the Kongming Temple. This point was also within Marshal Shi's expectations. It was very much in line with the Prajna God Emperor's character. But he was still disappointed that he didn't get the result he wanted. On the other side, Marshal Zhuo was full of anxiety. He opened the communication jade slip with a complicated expression. He was well aware that such a big mess would affect the overall situation, especially the Prajna God Emperor's plan. No matter how angry the Prajna God Emperor was, no matter how severe the punishment was, he was mentally prepared. But when Marshal Zhuo heard the Prajna God Emperor's order, he was stunned. He didn't expect that the Prajna God Emperor's tone was only cold and harsh. The main thing was that the Prajna God Emperor was giving an order, and she also mentioned that she would punish the wrongdoer later. Even the Prajna God Emperor didn't mention Marshal Zhuo's name, nor did she get angry at him. This surprised him quite a bit, but also made him feel very grateful. He respected and admired the Prajna God Emperor even more. He secretly made up his mind that after this matter was settled, he would take the initiative to apologize to the Prajna God Emperor and sincerely repent. Then, he solemnly put away the communication jade slip and contacted Marshal Shi with his divine sense. The two marshals didn't say much. After confirming the Prajna God Emperor's order, they began to carry it out. Very quickly, they passed down Pan Ruo God Emperor's orders, and through the various divine generals, it reached the ears of the soldiers. More than 300 divine warships and tens of thousands of soldiers began to reduce their firepower in an orderly manner. They gradually stopped their attacks and slowly retreated. At the same time, the master of Qin Yu Hall also received the message from the hall masters and began to carry out the order to stop the battle. The master of Qin Yu Hall repeatedly told his people to reduce their firepower and retreat in an orderly manner. But these people didn't have enough combat experience, and they were very tired. Their divine power was very weak. As a result, when the order to stop the battle was given, many people suddenly reduced their firepower and even stopped attacking. As a result, the defense of the Qin Yu Hall was weakened by 70%. Naturally, there were heavy casualties. In just a few breaths, more than 1,000 people were annihilated under the indiscriminate bombardment of the Prajna fleet. The master of Qin Yu Hall's heart ached when he saw this. He was so angry that his eyes almost popped out of their sockets. He couldn't wait to tear the people of the Prajna fleet into pieces. But things had already come to this point. He could only take the big picture into consideration. He suppressed his anger and ordered his people to gradually stop the battle. It seemed that the Qin Yu Hall and the Prajna fleet were showing signs of wanting to stop the battle. Ji Tianqing, who had been hiding in the dark and observing the situation, finally couldn't help but make a move. Chapter 4482. Ji Tianqing's goal was to make the Qin Yu Hall and the Hanya fleet kill each other and completely break off their relationship. Most importantly, he wanted to make the Hanya God Emperor unable to join the Kongming Temple and rely on such a powerful backer. He was about to succeed, but at the last moment, the two sides had to stop fighting. How could he let that happen? Coincidentally, the the master of Qin Yu Hall had to use all his strength to activate the Desolate Era scroll in order to cover the retreat of his people and reduce the casualties as much as possible. Boom! The Desolate Era scroll gathered the power of heaven and earth within 1,000,000 miles to form a double barrier that covered the sky and the sun, protecting the 10,800 people. At the same time, the Desolate Era scroll also released hundreds of torrential light beams that shot towards the Hanya fleet to block the bombardment of the divine warships. Under normal circumstances, the master of Qin Yu Hall would have a hard time hurting the divine warships and soldiers of the Hanya fleet. He could only block the enemy's attacks and ensure the safety of his people. However, Ji Tianqing decisively seized the opportunity and secretly released powerful divine power. He mixed it with the sky full of divine light and sword shadows and blasted it towards the Hanya fleet. Unbeknownst to everyone, the power of the Desolate Era scroll's divine power increased by several times. Boom! Bang! 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 Hundreds of five-colored torrents hit the Hanya fleet like sharp swords that could split heaven and earth. As for the tens of thousands of sword shadows that covered the sky, they didn't have much power and couldn't pose a threat to the Hanya fleet. Amidst a world-shaking boom, the defensive light barrier of the Hanya fleet was directly blasted to pieces, shooting out fragments that filled the sky. More than 3,000 soldiers were drowned by the five-colored torrent. Their bodies were crushed on the spot and turned into ashes. More than a dozen divine warships were also struck by the terrifying five-colored light pillars. They were blown to smithereens and turned into wreckage. In the blink of an eye, the Hanya fleet lost 4,000 soldiers and 16 warships. Such a shocking scene not only stunned Marshals Wu and Marshal Shi, but even the master of Qin Yu Hall and the protectors and elders were all stunned. Marshals Wu and Marshal Shi stared at the people of Qin Yu Hall with eyes that were about to pop out of their sockets. They couldn't help but roar, "Damn bastard, he was hiding his strength all this time until we were about to stop fighting. Only then did he use the trump card of that divine artifact when we weren't prepared. The master of Qin Yu Hall is a despicable bastard. Seeing that the two sides were about to stop fighting, he actually gave us a vicious attack on us. This is absolutely intolerable. No matter what I say, I can't let him be happy. An eye for an eye. The Hanya Yu Hall's view Yu Hall's Hall s Hanya Yu Hall's Halls us to stop fighting back. However, when the Hanya fleet attacked with all their strength, even if the master of Qin Yu Hall used the killer move of the long Desolate Era scroll, it would still be very difficult to heavily injure the Hanya fleet. Only when the two sides stopped fighting and retreated when the Hanya fleet wasn't prepared could the master of Qin Yu Hall's sneak attack succeed. This was too despicable, too despicable. Therefore, Marshals Wu and Marshal Shi ordered the soldiers to stop retreating and attack with all their strength. They had to destroy the Qin Yu Hall. They even had to force the master of Qin Yu Hall to admit defeat and beg for mercy before they could vent their anger. Anyway, the God Emperor of Qin Yu Hall had already expressed his attitude. Both sides could stop fighting, but the Hanya fleet had to show their strength. They couldn't lose. Kill. Kill those despicable bastards of the Qin Yu Hall. Charge. Immediately, angry roars and shouts sounded from the Hanya fleet again. Tens of thousands of soldiers and more than 300 divine warships attacked with all their strength again. Over at the Qin Yu Hall side, the master of Qin Yu Hall and the protectors and elders finally came back to their senses. Seeing the terrifying destructive power of the long Desolate Era scroll, everyone was filled with shock. They couldn't help but mutter, "Heavens! The power of the long Desolate Era scroll is actually this strong. This must be the hidden killer move of the long Desolate Era scroll, right? Why didn't the Hall Master use it before? Could it be that it can only be used once in a short period of time? Or did the Hall Master purposely leave it until the end, and when the Hanya fleet wasn't prepared, he gave them a heavy blow? Not to mention the protectors and elders, even the master of Qin Yu Hall was stupefied. They looked at the long desolate era scroll in their hands, and then looked at the Hanya fleet that had suffered heavy casualties. At this moment, earth-shattering shouts sounded from the Hanya fleet. The divine robes of the more than 300 divine warships lit up with resplendent divine light again, releasing 5 colored pillars of light that covered the sky and earth. Tens of thousands of soldiers gathered their morale again, and attacked with murderous intent. The citizens of the Qinyu Hall that were in the middle of a ceasefire and retreating immediately felt a huge pressure, as if they could smell the scent of death. For a moment, countless citizens were somewhat flustered. The master of Qinyu Hall, the protectors, and the elders all felt their hearts skip a beat, and knew that the situation was not good. It's over. The Hanya fleet's people have been enraged, and are going to fight us to the death. Damn it! Didn't we agree on a ceasefire? Why are they acting like they've gone mad? Everyone, don't just stand there, quickly command everyone to resist with all their strength. The master of Qinyu Hall didn't have time to think, and could only use all his strength to control the long desolate era scroll, and do his best to condense a defensive barrier to protect his citizens. Unfortunately, the citizens of the Qinyu Hall didn't have enough battle experience, and even though they hurriedly cast spells to resist again, it was already too late, and the effect was minimal. More importantly, while the Hanya fleet was fighting back with all their strength, Ji Tianqing, who only wanted to see the world plunged into chaos, took the opportunity to add fuel to the fire. He quietly released thousands of divine light beams, and mixed them with the flashes of blades and shadows of swords in the sky, and attacked the citizens of the Qinyu Hall. Bam! 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 Boom! 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 In the next moment, tens of thousands of divine light beams and flashes of blades and shadows of swords drowned more than 10,000 citizens of the Qinyu Hall, and earth-shattering noises burst out. At first, the defensive barrier condensed by the long desolate era scroll was shattered into pieces and exploded. Then, many citizens were drowned by the flashes of blades and shadows of swords, and countless people were minced into pieces of flesh. Exclamations and screams filled the sky. At this moment, the master of Qinyu Hall, the protectors, and the elders were furious and helpless, and their eyes turned scarlet. They couldn't believe that the Hanya fleet's all-out counterattack had such terrifying destructive power. In just one exchange, more than 2,000 citizens died tragically in the sky full of divine light, and turned into ashes and dust. More than 1,000 citizens were severely injured, and their blood was dripping. It was a horrible sight to behold. 2 elders and a few deacons were also killed on the spot, and not even their bones were left behind. Ever since the two sides started the battle, the Qinyu Hall had only lost about 4,000 citizens. In just one breath, the Qinyu Hall had lost more than 2,000 people, and more than 1,000 people had lost the ability to fight. This was simply too terrifying. All kinds of thoughts flashed through everyone's minds. Are the people of the Hanya fleet crazy? Could it be that they were also hiding their strength before, and this is their real combat power? Damn it! These despicable and vicious invaders are murdering our citizens so cruelly. This is an irreconcilable grudge. This is too much. Even if we have to disobey the orders of the Hall Masters, we must avenge our dead people. The Book Guest House Reading Website. Chapter 4483. The Pure Moon Hall had suffered heavy casualties. The surviving members of the Pure Moon Hall were all furious. The Hall Master of the Pure Moon Hall, the Guardians of Dharma, and the Elders all went berserk. The 8,000 citizens were roaring furiously. Their potential had been stimulated. They had used up all their energy and were very weak. But now, they were full of fighting spirit and killing intent. On the other hand, the people of the Prajna fleet were stunned. Even Marshal Zhua and Marshal Shi were shocked. They couldn't believe their eyes. They simply couldn't believe that the power of their counterattack was actually so powerful and so destructive. For a moment, the two marshals and the many divine generals had the same thought. Could it be that the soldiers' potential was stimulated by their anger? Maybe it's because the people of the Qin Yu Hall are at the end of their rope and are retreating. That's why they are so weak. Since our fleet is so powerful, what are we afraid of? We must beat the Pure Moon Hall to a pulp and make them admit defeat. Humph! Despicable Qin Yu Hall. How dare you play dirty with us? Let's show you how powerful we are. Everyone felt relieved. At the same time, their confidence was boosted. They were determined to beat the crap out of the Qin Yu Hall. The Qin Yu Hall was also infuriated. Under the leadership of the master of Qin Yu Hall, they launched a counterattack. The master of Qin Yu Hall controlled the desolate antiquity scroll. He didn't hesitate to consume his own life to increase his combat power by 3 times. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Suddenly, the heaven and earth in a 2 million-mile radius started to shake. The terrifying divine power of heaven and earth gathered into billions of swords and sabers, attacking the Prajna fleet from all directions. Dozens of purple chi dragons also shot out from the desolate antiquity scroll and attacked the Prajna fleet. As for the other protectors, elders, and citizens, there was no need to say anything. They all unleashed their full strength without regard for anything else and used their trump cards. When all the divine abilities and spells were gathered together, their power was unimaginably strong, and their momentum was also very great. Dazzling divine light, billions of sword lights, wind, fire, and lightning, drowned the Hanya fleet like a flood. Ji Tianqing could see everything clearly. Even though the 8,000 characters of Qin Yu Hall had retaliated with hatred and had unleashed their most powerful trump cards and ultimate skills, they were still unable to do anything. However, these people were strong on the outside but weak on the inside. Their strength had long been exhausted, and they were only holding on with their minds. The divine spells they cast only seemed to be powerful, but their power and destructive power were not strong enough. At the very least, the combined counterattack of these 8,000 civilians was far from enough to heavily injure Hanya's fleet. Ji Tianqing, of course, had to add fuel to the fire. He secretly used a few ultimate techniques to strengthen the Qin Yu Hall. In any case, the saber light and sword shadows that he secretly used were mixed in with the brilliance of the divine arts that filled the sky. It was impossible to tell them apart. Rumble. The outcome satisfied both Ji Tianqing and Qin Yu Hall. Following a deafening explosion, the defensive barriers and barriers formed by the Hanya fleet were all smashed to pieces. Another 20 divine warships were blown to pieces. More than 3,000 soldiers died on the spot, and more than 2,000 people were severely injured. Such heavy casualties caused a huge hole and gap to appear in the battle formation of the Hanya fleet. Their defensive power was a lot weaker. The destructive shockwaves also hit all the warships, making it difficult for the soldiers to quickly restore their formation. The officers and soldiers of the Sanskrit fleet were naturally infuriated after suffering such a miserable slaughter. They roared and cursed hysterically. At the same time, the soldiers also lost their minds and launched a desperate counterattack. Even Marshal Zhua and Marshal Shi temporarily put aside the order of the Hanya God Emperor. The two of them thought that the Hanya fleet could stop fighting, but they couldn't accept such a humiliating result, and they couldn't be fooled by the Qin Yu Hall. If the Qin Yu Hall didn't want to make peace, then don't blame them for being merciless. They'll beat you until you kneel and beg for mercy. Thus, under the command of the two marshals, all the remaining divine warships, including the 20,000 soldiers who had been biding their time, all joined the battle. Only now did the Hanya fleet join the battle without holding back. Swoosh! Swoosh swoosh swoosh! 300 divine warships fired their divine cannons at the same time, releasing tens of thousands of beams of light that rained down on the people of the Qin Yu Hall. Tens of thousands of soldiers also formed battle formations and joined forces to use all kinds of divine arts and secret techniques, bombarding the people of the Qin Yu Hall indiscriminately. With the previous experience, both sides fought with all their might. They didn't stop or stand still. Both sides didn't take turns to attack each other. Instead, they continued to attack without stopping. Suddenly, the divine arts that blotted out the sky clashed fiercely between heaven and earth, producing a deafening sound. The fragments of divine light that splashed out were surrounded by rings of five-colored torrents. They spread in all directions, engulfing everything within a radius of 100,000 miles. The Hanya fleet clearly had the upper hand and could definitely suppress the people of the Qin Yu Hall, forcing them to flee. However, Ji Tianqing was secretly interfering. He always helped the Qin Yu Hall increase their firepower and severely damaged the soldiers of the Hanya fleet. Thus, both sides were actually locked in battle. It was impossible to determine the victor in a short period of time. As for the casualties, both sides were very tragic. Every second, hundreds of people were killed. Just like this, the Hanya fleet and the people of the Qin Yu Hall went crazy. They lost their minds and fought a bloody battle. The situation on the battlefield gradually went out of control. The formations of both sides became fragmented, and the battlefield began to scatter. However, no one noticed any clues, and no one suspected that someone was secretly interfering. Both sides thought that the other side had been hiding their strength until now. They cursed the other side for being sinister and despicable. Unknowingly, an hour had passed. This chaotic and cruel battle was finally coming to an end. At this time, the Hanya fleet had 180 divine warships left. There were less than 40,000 survivors. More than 10,000 of them were severely injured and had lost their ability to fight. More than 4,000 of the 8,000 people of the Qin Yu Hall had been killed. Of the 3,000 survivors, more than half of them were severely injured. It was a tragic sight. Even the 1,000 survivors who weren't injured had used up all their strength and almost lost their ability to fight. Most importantly, the battlefield had expanded to a radius of 100,000 miles. It was divided into 6 or 7 groups of people. In one area, more than a dozen divine warships were attacking more than 200 Qin Yu Hall citizens. In another area, more than 20 divine warships were attacking more than 300 Qin Yu Hall citizens. This was the moment when Ji Tianqing took advantage of the chaos and completely messed up the situation. He cruised around the battlefield in secret, destroying one divine battleship after another and killing batch after batch of people of the Pure Moon Hall. The soldiers and citizens of both sides were killed one after another in confusion. The number of survivors decreased sharply. Chapter 4484. Before the final battle broke out, the people of the Prajna fleet thought that they would definitely win. The master of Qin Yu Hall and the 8,000 people of the Prajna fleet also thought that they had no advantage and that it was unlikely for them to win. But in the end, the two marshals and the divine generals of the Prajna fleet were dumbfounded. They had never expected that the battle with the people of Qin Yu Hall would end in a lose-lose situation. On the 7 battlefields, the Prajna fleet only had about 50 divine warships and less than 10,000 soldiers, and half of them were injured. Looking at the 8,000 people of Qin Yu Hall, only about 1,000 of them were still alive, and all of them were in a sorry state. Within a radius of 100,000 miles, all the mountains and rivers had disappeared. They had been razed to the ground and turned into ruins. The ground was full of wreckage and fragments of warships. Corpses, blood, and divine weapon fragments were scattered all over the ground. It was a tragic scene. On the surface, it seemed that the Prajna fleet had the advantage in numbers and had won. But in reality, the 10,000 surviving soldiers of the Prajna fleet were about the same as the 1,000 people of Qin Yu Hall. Fortunately, both sides had fought until the end, and their divine powers had been exhausted, so they could not unleash much power. If both sides were at their peak and continued to fight, it was very likely that they would be completely wiped out. Marshal Zhua and Marshal Shi were completely dumbfounded. Looking at the remaining 10,000 soldiers and 50 divine warships, they even wanted to commit suicide. It's over. We are completely done for. We had 100,000 soldiers and more than 400 divine warships, but now there are only a few left, and they are badly injured. There is no need for God Emperor to give us any punishment. We should just kill ourselves. How could this be? We clearly had the upper hand and completely suppressed the people of Qin Yu Hall. Why did it end up like this when we were only careless for an hour? There are only 10,000 severely injured soldiers left. How are we going to explain this to God Emperor? The two marshals' hearts were dead, and they were filled with despair. Many divine generals were also at a loss for what to do. Fortunately, Marshal Zhua and Marshal Shi quickly calmed down. They looked at each other and gave orders at the same time. Retreat. All soldiers, listen up. Retreat immediately. At this point, they could no longer care about the dignity of God Emperor of Prajna fleet. Stopping the losses in time and saving the 10,000 soldiers was the most important thing. At this point, they were still thinking about defeating Qin Yu Hall and forcing Qin Yu Hall to surrender. On the other hand, the master of Qin Yu Hall and the guardians and elders of Qin Yu Hall. They looked at the 1,000 survivors and saw the miserable state they were in. They were all frightened and shocked. They were God Emperor Prajna, God Emperor Prajna fleet divine weapon of Qin Yu. Gods Prajna divine God. Qin be half Prajna be out of their God, half of Qin Prajna fleet and Ina fleet. This was a fatal blow to Qin Yu Hall. 70% of the god kings that Qin Yu Hall had accumulated over tens of thousands of years had perished in this battle. 95% of the high-level divine lords that they had cultivated over tens of thousands of years had perished. It could be said that the backbone of Qin Yu Hall had been destroyed. Without 20 to 30,000 years, Qin Yu Hall would not be able to recover its strength. The master of Qin Yu Hall blamed himself and regretted his actions. He hated Prajna fleet even more. Now, the result was as he had said before. Both sides had a blood feud that was irreconcilable. It's over. Qin Yu Hall's hard work over tens of thousands of years has been destroyed. Qin Yu Hall only exists in name now. I'm afraid that the Temple of God will merge us with other halls when they hear about this, that damned Prajna God Emperor. It's all because of those bastards under her command. The guardians and elders were filled with despair and anger. Their faces were distorted as they cursed and discussed with hoarse voices. Luckily, the master of Qin Yu Hall was still able to suppress his anger and maintain his rationality. He decisively gave the order to retreat. He used the last of his strength to cover the retreat of Qin Yu Hall's citizens. Of course, as both sides were retreating, there were still some casualties, but it did not affect them much. After 100 breaths of time, both sides separated and retreated. Soon, the 1,000 citizens of Qin Yu Hall gathered together under the master of Qin Yu Hall's command. The hall master of Pure Moon didn't say anything, nor did she say anything harsh to the Prajna fleet. She only glared at the Prajna fleet viciously, then turned around and led her people back to the Seven Moon Mountain. If Prajna fleet won, they would not have suffered many casualties. They could still chase after the master of Qin Yu Hall and the others. However, they had suffered heavy casualties. They only had 50 godly warships and 10,000 soldiers left. How would they dare to chase after the master of Qin Yu Hall? In comparison, their losses were even greater, and their situation was even more dangerous. After all, Qin Yu Hall had lost 14,000 elites in this battle, but there were still 180,000 citizens left on Seven Moon Mountain. As for Prajna fleet's 100,000 soldiers, only 10,000 were left. They could not expand their population in a short period of time. This was the most fatal blow. Even if they did not fight with Qin Yu Hall anymore, no matter where Prajna fleet went, they had lost the right to compete with the other halls. Furthermore, the two sides had already formed a blood feud. It was unknown whether Prajna God Emperor could still join the Kongming Temple. After the 50 godly warships gathered, they quietly retreated to the south under the guidance of the two marshals. The fleet would retreat to a safe area and allow all the soldiers to recuperate and recover. As the fleet retreated, Marshal Zhua and Marshal Shi met and looked at each other with bitter expressions. What should we do? Now that things have come to this, what can we do? Should we send a message to the God Emperor and report the results truthfully? Of course, we should report the truth. However, the culprit is Qin Yu Hall. Whether or not the God Emperor can forgive us, it has already happened. There is no point in running away. We should face it bravely. This time, Marshal Shi had also participated in this grave mistake. He could not shirk his responsibility. He had also given up on this idea and accepted his fate. Marshal Zhua did not say anything else. He took out a special communication jade slip and was about to send a message to Prajna God Emperor. However, when the words came to his mouth, he could not help but shrink back. He passed the jade slip to Marshal Shi. You should report it. I have let down the God Emperor's trust. I have no face to say anything else. Marshal Shi understood his feelings and did not refuse. He took the communication jade slip and began to report the situation. Whoosh! The communication jade turned into a stream of light and disappeared into the dark sky. The two marshals quietly looked up at the sky and stood there for a long time without saying a word. They were waiting for Prajna God Emperor's reply, and also waiting for the judgment of fate. Translator, Kingbao Editor, Dark Gem. Chapter 4485. The headquarters of the faraway Kongming Temple was located in the Realm of Emptiness. The palaces in the depths of the Realm of Emptiness were majestic and sacred. In several magnificent palaces, the temple masters and the Prajna God Emperor were patiently waiting for news. It had been more than an hour since they had issued the order to stop the battle. In their opinion, after so long, the Qin Yu Hall and the Prajna fleet should have stopped fighting. Moreover, both sides should have retreated to a safe place to recuperate, right? Why hadn't the master of Qin Yu Hall and Marshal Zhua sent a message to report the latest situation after so long? The master of Qin Yu Hall and the two marshals wouldn't dare to disobey orders. Could there have been some kind of accident? The temple masters and the Prajna God Emperor had this question in their minds. As time passed, the Prajna God Emperor and the temple masters couldn't wait any longer. They wanted to send another message to question the master of Qin Yu Hall and the two marshals. At this moment, several streams of light flew from the sky and landed in the hands of the Prajna God Emperor and the temple masters. Seeing that the communication jade slips had finally arrived, everyone was secretly relieved. They hurriedly opened the jade slips to check the information inside. However, when they finished reading the information in the jade slips and learned the final situation of the battle, their expressions changed dramatically. Especially Ban Ruo Emperor God, his eyes went black and he was so angry that he almost spat out blood. Yes, her soldiers and the Qin Yu Hall had indeed stopped fighting. However, she didn't expect that the two sides had stopped fighting not because of her order, but because the two sides had been fighting for so long that there weren't many soldiers left and they had to stop fighting. She had brought 100,000 soldiers to the planet of origin. Now, before she could gain a foothold on the planet of origin, she had suffered such a heavy blow that only 10,000 soldiers were left. Moreover, those 10,000 soldiers were all injured, light or heavy. It was impossible for them to recover in a short period of time. This was like a bolt from the blue. The Prajna God Emperor was so angry that she almost went crazy. If the two marshals were standing in front of her, she most likely wouldn't be able to suppress her anger and kill them. She was so angry that her whole body trembled, her face was pale, and her entire body was filled with a chilling killing intent. When Qi Xia saw her reaction, he had a premonition that the situation was not good, and he was extremely anxious. However, she didn't dare to ask questions while her master was burning with anger. On the other side, the hall masters were also dumbfounded on the spot. They only felt anger and helplessness. What made them angry was that Hall leader Pure Moon had disobeyed them. Prajna God Emperor had ordered a ceasefire, but she had still refused to stop fighting, and fought had to kill the Prajna dynasty's fleet. Such audacity and recklessness, acting willfully without regard for the consequences, and causing such a great disaster, did they not deserve to die? To the Hall masters, the tens of thousands of deaths caused by this great battle were very serious, but they were still barely able to accept it. But now that things had escalated to this point, it was impossible for Hanya God Emperor to join the Temple of Kongming. This was the result that they could not accept. It's over. Our previous efforts were all in vain. Damn that master of Qin Yu Hall. How dare she be so reckless? In my opinion, there's no need to hold tomorrow's ceremony. Prajna can't join us. Sigh, the initial cause was just a trivial matter. How could it have developed to this point? She ruined our plan. The master of Qin Yu Hall deserves to die. Everyone saw that Prajna also received the message Jade slip. She also knows about this news. Let's not waste any more time. Let's think about how to appease Prajna and if there's any chance of getting her back. The temple masters discussed secretly and quickly made a decision. The second temple master led the third temple master and the fourth temple master to talk to Prajna. When the three temple masters came to Prajna's palace, Prajna also brought Chi Xia God King and a group of guards to leave the palace. The two sides met in the square in front of the palace. They stopped at the same time. The atmosphere was very awkward. Prajna God Emperor was still angry. Her face was still cold and her body was full of killing intent. But she had already calmed down. Her expression was cold and her eyes were cold. She didn't do anything unusual. She looked at the three temple masters indifferently and said, "I have already guessed the purpose of your visit. But you don't need to say anything. I have already made up my mind." Hearing her cold and indifferent tone, the three temple masters knew that this matter was difficult to resolve. But since they were already here, they had to say a few words and express their attitude before leaving. Maybe if they showed enough sincerity, Prajna God Emperor would hesitate and give them another chance. So, the second temple master cupped his hands and said, "Prajna, the situation has developed to this point. We can't control or predict it. It's also a result we don't want to see. No matter what the cause is, that master of Qin Yu Hall dared to disobey orders and cause such a disaster. I will give you an explanation. Please stay for a few more days. See how I punish that bastard." The third temple master and the fourth temple master also said, "Prajna God Emperor, we are both very sincere. It's just that it's hard to restrain our subordinates. Their mistakes shouldn't affect our decision. This is the method and determination of a superior. Prajna God Emperor, even though the situation has developed to this point, our Kongming Temple still welcomes you with open arms. I hope you can consider carefully and not be impulsive." Prajna God Emperor looked at the three temple masters expressionlessly and said indifferently, "How you want to punish the master of Qin Yu Hall is your Kongming Temple's matter. It has nothing to do with me. I am willing to believe in your sincerity. But since the situation has developed to this point, how can I join the Kongming Temple? If I really agree, how can I face the 90,000 soldiers who died? How can I face the 10,000 soldiers who survived? In short, it's impossible for me to join the Kongming Temple. You three temple masters don't need to persuade me. If you are still willing to respect me, then please leave and let me go back to deal with this matter." Seeing that she was really stubborn, the third temple master and the fourth temple master frowned and hesitated. The second temple master sighed helplessly and asked, "Forget it. Since you have made up your mind, I won't persuade you anymore. However, I want to ask you something. Prajna, what do you plan to do next?" Prajna God Emperor said indifferently, "Naturally, I will deal with the aftermath of this matter and appease the soldiers who survived. The second temple master was silent for a moment. Then he said in a serious tone, Prajna, since you are not willing to join me, I hope this matter will end here. You can appease the soldiers, or you can take them to a faraway place and leave my territory. But if you have thoughts of taking revenge and destroying Qin Yu Hall, I will remind you that it's best to dispel those thoughts. Chapter 4486. When the second palace master smiled, he was very kind and amiable. But when he put on a serious face, he could also be very dignified. His serious tone contained a hint of intimidation. And the meaning he expressed was not only the Kongming Temple's attitude, but also the Pan-Roa God Emperor's expectations. Yes, the Pan-Roa God Emperor was willing to join the Kongming Temple, so everyone was a family. Anything could be discussed and reconciled. But if the Pan-Roa God Emperor insisted on not joining the Kongming Temple, then the two sides would be strangers. There was no need to talk about friendship or face. Even if the master of Qin Yu Hall had made a big mistake, Qin Yu Hall was still a part of the Kongming Temple. Those hundreds of thousands of people were all citizens of Qin Yu Hall. If the Pan-Roa God Emperor wanted to take revenge and deal with the people of Qin Yu Hall, then she would be the Kongming Temple's enemy. The more enthusiastic the Kongming Temple was when they tried to persuade her to join the Kongming Temple, the more cruel they would be when they dealt with her in the future. The Pan-Roa God Emperor naturally thought of this and knew the severity of the consequences. But her thoughts did not waver, and her will would not change because of this. But she was still in the Kongming secret realm. In front of the three palace masters, she could not show it. Otherwise, if the two sides fell out and really fought, she, Qi Xia, and the others would not be able to leave alive. And so, the Pan-Roa God Emperor bowed slightly without changing her expression and said calmly, "Thank you for the reminder, second palace master. But you worry too much. This emperor has been to the Kongming secret realm before and knows the strength of the Kongming Temple. Why would I do something unwise?" Since she had already expressed that she would not pursue the matter or seek revenge, the three palace masters did not say anything more. They cupped their hands and bowed to her, then stepped aside to let her pass. The Pan-Roa God Emperor bid farewell to the three palace masters and left with Qi Xia and the guards. Whoosh! Whoosh! Everyone flew into the sky and headed straight for the exit of the secret realm. Their figures quickly disappeared into the horizon. The three palace masters stood in the square in front of the palace and looked at their departing figures with complicated expressions. The third palace master and the fourth palace master felt that it was a pity, and their eyes were filled with regret. However, the second palace master's expression regained its dignity, and his eyes became clear and cold. He suddenly said in a deep voice, "Fourth brother, immediately take a group of elite guards and quietly rush to Seven Moon Mountain." Hearing those words, the third palace master and the fourth palace master were both stunned. Their expressions were somewhat astonished. Second palace master, why did you suddenly make this decision? Second palace master, why are you doing this? Appease the people of Qin Yu Hall? Punish the master of Qin Yu Hall? Or, are you guarding against the revenge of the Prajna God Emperor? The second hall master said with an indifferent expression, all three. Later, the first hall master will draft a decree to punish the master of Qin Yu Hall. When the time comes, you will personally bring the decree to Seven Moon Mountain and settle the matter before coming back. The fourth palace master was silent and accepted the task. However, the third palace master asked with confusion, "Second palace master, appeasing the people of Seven Moon Mountain and punishing the master of Qin Yu Hall is understandable. Guarding against the revenge of the Prajna God Emperor? It doesn't seem necessary, right? Didn't she just say it? She knows how powerful the Kongming Temple is, and she won't seek her own death." Ha! The second palace master twitched the corner of his mouth and sneered, "You don't know this woman, so you underestimated her. Based on my understanding of her personality, she won't be able to take this lying down. In front of us, she's just temporarily suppressing and pretending. When she returns to Seven Moon Mountain, she'll definitely deal with the Qin Yu Hall and avenge her soldiers. This woman looks cold and wise, and she won't do anything irrational. But in reality, she's not as cold as she looks. She'll still have emotional fluctuations, and she'll have weaknesses and flaws. The third palace master and the fourth palace master looked at each other, and the same thought flashed through their minds. Why didn't I see it before? The second palace master has studied women's minds. But no matter what, the second palace master was so determined and insisted that the fourth palace master bring a group of elite guards to Seven Moon Mountain. The fourth palace master could only obey. At the same time, the Prajna God Emperor left the Kongming realm with godly King Qi Xia and the others. They rode on the divine ship and flew across the sky at lightning speed, heading straight for Seven Moon Mountain. Godly King Qi Xia was in charge of controlling the divine ship, while the Prajna God Emperor sat in the control room, looking ahead expressionlessly. She was analyzing many clues in her mind. Although she hadn't said anything about this, she had many questions in her heart. Things had developed to this point, which was beyond her expectations and made her feel suspicious. She still couldn't believe that the 15,000 people of the Pure Moon Hall could fight against her fleet for such a long time and cause so many soldiers to die. There must be something wrong here. However, she had to go back in person. Only after an actual investigation could she find out the clues and clues. Godly King Qi Xia saw that his master was silent, so he took the initiative to speak. Master, what do you plan to do next? Are we really going to swallow this insult and lead our soldiers away from Kongming Temple's territory? The Kongming Temple's territory is too big. Even if we travel for half a year without rest, we might not be able to go around it. The Prajna God Emperor collected her thoughts and snorted. She said in a cold voice, "Our soldiers are severely injured, so we should focus on recovery first. As for leaving Kongming Temple's territory, we will, of course, leave. But that will have to wait until I've dealt with Qin Yu Hall." She had brought 100,000 of her most elite soldiers and entered the planet of origin. She had wanted to achieve great things. In the end, he was defeated before he even had the chance to display any of his methods and ambitions. He had truly died before he could even achieve victory. How could she not hate the master of Qin Yu Hall? How could she forgive Qin Yu Hall? Godly King Qi Xia nodded and said firmly, "That's right. We need to conserve our energy before we seek revenge on Qin Yu Hall. Otherwise, those tens of thousands of soldiers who died will not be able to rest in peace. No matter how powerful Kongming Temple is, we will not yield." She paused for a moment and asked, "Master, I see that you have been deep in thought. Is there something else behind this matter?" The Prajna God Emperor looked at her and nodded. "Master's years of teaching you were not in vain. You also saw the clues." Godly King Qi Xia nodded quickly. "Ever since I received the news, I felt that it was strange. I still can't figure it out. The master of Qin Yu Hall gathered 15,000 elites to fight with our 90,000 soldiers. Even though Qin Yu Hall has the protection of a powerful divine weapon, they do not have much experience in fighting. How could they cause such heavy losses to us? There must be something wrong here. I even suspect that the godly temple of Kongming did something in secret, or did they ambush a lot of powerhouses to weaken our forces? In this way, when we join the Kongming Temple, it will be easier for them to control us." Chapter 4487. The Pan-God Emperor had naturally thought of the problem that Crimson Afterglow had raised. However, this was only one of her many thoughts. She still needed to return to the fleet and investigate before she could confirm her conjectures. Crimson Afterglow also understood this point. Everything she said now was just conjecture and could not be confirmed. What they needed to do was to remain vigilant against the Kongming Temple and quickly return to the fleet to comfort the 10,000 survivors. As for revenge, that could only be discussed later. Meanwhile, in the Kongming Temple's headquarters, the fourth palace master had gathered 2,000 elite godly monarchs and quietly left the Kongming mystic realm. They boarded a top-grade king-grade divine warship and concealed their tracks as they silently rushed towards Seven Moon Mountain. The fourth palace master's mission was to pacify Seven Moon Mountain and prevent the Pan-Roa fleet from retaliating. With the fourth palace master, the God Emperor, leading the team and 2,000 godly monarchs, it was definitely more than enough. Even if the Pan-God Emperor returned to the fleet, it would be easy for the fourth palace master to wipe out the 10,000 soldiers of the Pan-Roa fleet. The reason why so many godly monarchs were mobilized was because the fourth palace master still had other secret missions. In the minds of the palace masters, this matter was far from simple. They had to make ample preparations to prevent any accidents from happening. While the divine warship was rushing, the fourth palace master released his divine sense and used a secret technique to track down the Pan-God Emperor's location. Before setting off, the first palace master had instructed him to keep a close eye on the Pan-God Emperor. The fourth palace master naturally had to grasp the Pan-God Emperor's location and whereabouts, but he could not get too close. Otherwise, he would be detected by the Pan-God Emperor. The Pan-God Emperor and the fourth palace master were both rushing towards Seven Moon Mountain. At this moment, Seven Moon Mountain was under lockdown and all the divine palaces were closed. The 180,000 citizens of Seven Moon Mountain who had hidden in the divine palaces had already retreated from the divine palaces and returned to the city. However, all the citizens received the news that Qin Yu Hall had suffered a crushing defeat and suffered heavy casualties. Not only had the mainstays of Qin Yu Hall suffered heavy casualties, but several elders and deacons had also lost their lives in the battle. It could be said that Qin Yu Hall had suffered the most devastating blow and trauma in its history. It was currently at its weakest. This news made the citizens of Qin Yu Hall feel depressed and uneasy. People were hiding in their own homes, but they couldn't help but secretly communicate with each other and discuss in whispers. The entire city was enveloped in an oppressive and gloomy atmosphere, filled with the smell of panic and uneasiness. The Hall Master of the Pure Moon Hall and the remaining 1,000 elite subjects all returned to their respective divine palaces to recuperate and heal their wounds. The Master of Qin Yu Hall didn't want to explain the crushing defeat and heavy losses of Qin Yu Hall. He also didn't have the extra energy to comfort the panicking people. All he could do was close the city's entrances and exits and activate the defensive formation. Furthermore, he sent out the godly kings and godly lords who hadn't participated in the battle and weren't injured to guard the vital points of the city. They also maintained vigilant patrols. The reason he did this was to prevent Hanya's fleet from counterattacking and ambushing them. Hanya's fleet had also suffered heavy losses, so the possibility of them attacking Seven Moon Mountain wasn't high. However, the master of Qin Yu Hall had already suffered a loss. Of course, he had to maintain his vigilance and take precautions. On the other hand, the master of Qin Yu Hall also wanted to prevent the citizens from panicking and escaping from the city. He had already reported the situation to the Kongming Temple. He believed that the Kongming Temple would soon send a temple master to resolve this matter. What he needed to do was wait patiently. He just needed to protect Seven Moon Mountain before a certain temple master arrived. Seven Moon Mountain was completely silent. No sound could be heard, and no traces of the citizens could be seen. Only the patrolling guards could be seen in the sky. South of Seven Moon Mountain, in a mountain range 10 million li away, Hanya's fleet was resting. It was similarly silent. The remaining 50 warships stopped in the sky and arranged themselves in a circular formation. The divine power of the various divine warships was interconnected, forming a huge defensive barrier. All the warships maintained a defensive posture. The heavily injured soldiers were in seclusion and recuperating in the warships. The soldiers with lighter injuries, who could still recover some of their combat strength after some simple treatment, acted as guards, maintaining vigilance and monitoring the surroundings. They were outsiders to the planet of origin. Currently, apart from Hanya God Emperor and Crimson Afterglow, everyone else could be an enemy. They couldn't guess what would happen next, so they could only prepare and defend, preventing any accidents from happening. Only when Hanya God Emperor returned could the soldiers relax their vigilance. Ji Tianqing had achieved his goal, but he didn't leave. He would often wander between Hanya's fleet and Seven Moon Mountain, observing the movements of both sides and speculating on the movements of the Kongming Temple and Hanya God Emperor. He was certain that Hanya God Emperor wouldn't join the Kongming Temple after receiving the news. Currently, Hanya God Emperor would definitely return to the fleet as quickly as possible. The Kongming Temple wasn't stupid or kind. They would most likely send 1 or 2 temple masters, leading many elite experts, to Seven Moon Mountain to deal with the aftermath. He didn't have any grudges with the Kongming Temple's temple masters, so he didn't have to provoke them. However, he needed to grasp Hanya God Emperor's movements and find a good opportunity to strike, defeating or killing Hanya God Emperor. Only by dealing with Hanya God Emperor as quickly as possible could he explore the planet of origin and search for the other 4 God Emperors. When the time came, he would adapt to the situation and use all sorts of methods to deal with the other 4 God Emperors one by one. And now, he was wandering between Seven Moon Mountain and Hanya's fleet, waiting for Hanya God Emperor to pass by. He had already laid down several traps and ambushes on the path Hanya God Emperor would take to return to the fleet, waiting for them to come. He was keenly aware that when Hanya God Emperor went to the Kongming Temple, she had only brought Crimson Dawn and a squad of guards with her. Right now, Hanya God Emperor's defenses were at their weakest. Once she returned to the fleet, Ji Tianqing would find it much more difficult to assassinate her. Just like this, the days passed one after another. Every side had their own plans and calculations, and they were all trying to find out where the others were. Only Qin Yu Hall and Hanya's fleet, the 2 parties involved, were in the calmest and most at ease. They didn't need to do anything, nor did they need to consider any plans or schemes. All they needed to do was wait patiently. In the blink of an eye, a month had passed. Hanya God Emperor's flagship had finally arrived at Qin Yu Hall's territory. In just one more day, she would return to the fleet. The 4th Palace Master and 2,000 elite Divine King experts followed closely behind Pan Roa Emperor God and were about to reach the Seven Moon Mountain. At this time, the Master of Qin Yu Hall and the 2 marshals had received the news and were waiting with complicated emotions. Ji Tianqing calculated the time and guessed that Hanya God Emperor was about to return. He stopped meditating and began to vigilantly monitor his surroundings. Chapter 4488. For everyone, it was a long and torturous day. The Master of Qin Yu Hall was very nervous. He didn't know what would happen when he met the 4th Palace Master from the Temple of Light. Because of his impulsiveness and dereliction of duty, he had caused such a disaster, causing the Prajna God Emperor to no longer join the Kongming Temple, causing great losses to the Temple of Light. How angry were the Palace Masters? How would the 4th Palace Master punish him when he came with the 1st Palace Master's decree? The Master of Qin Yu Hall wasn't sure, so he was uneasy and even a little panicked. But the news of the 4th Palace Master's impending arrival made the protectors, elders, and deacons under his command heave a sigh of relief. These people only knew that since the 4th Palace Master had come, he would definitely deal with the aftermath, and the Mount of 7 Moons would no longer be in danger. As for how the 4th Palace Master would punish the Master of Qin Yu Hall, that had nothing to do with them. On the other side, the 2 marshals of the Prajna fleet felt the same as the Master of Qin Yu Hall. They were also very uneasy. Although they had been very frightened a month ago, they had guessed that the Prajna God Emperor wouldn't let them off easily after committing such a big mistake. But with a month's buffer, they could still imagine that the Prajna God Emperor's anger would dissipate, and the punishment would be reduced. But in this month, the Prajna God Emperor hadn't contacted them. Until today, Qi Xia Deity King sent a message back, saying that they would be able to return to the fleet in one day. The Prajna God Emperor's attitude made the two marshals realize that the situation was very serious, and that the God Emperor's anger hadn't dissipated. They didn't need to think to know that they would be in trouble in one day. But the biggest suspense was how the Prajna God Emperor would punish them, and to what extent they would be in trouble. It was also the source of their uneasiness. Could it be that the Prajna God Emperor would kill them to vent his anger? If it was before, Marshal Zhua and Marshal Shi would have denied this idea, thinking that it was very unlikely. But now, the two marshals didn't dare to be sure. The torturous day for many people was finally over. The next morning, the Prajna God Emperor's warship passed by Mount Seven Moons and headed straight for the southern fleet. The Prajna God Emperor's divine sense had discovered that the gates of the Seven Moons mountain were tightly shut. The defensive formation had been activated, and they were on full alert. The battleship did not stop. A cold light flashed in her eyes. She sneered and quickly left. Her hatred for Qin Yu Hall hadn't diminished in the slightest. When the time was right, she would definitely flatten those mountains and destroy the entire city. Shwa! The battleship cut through the clouds and quickly disappeared into the horizon. In another 2 hours, the Prajna God Emperor would return to the fleet. She could already imagine how nervous Marshal Zhua and Marshal Shi were right now, and how nervous they were. However, she had already decided on how to punish the two marshals a month ago, and she would not change it even now. As the battleship left Seven Moon Mountain, it got closer and closer to the fleet. 8 million miles, 7 million miles, 6 million miles. As time passed, the Prajna God Emperor's calm and indifferent state of mind suddenly fluctuated. For some reason, as she got closer and closer to the fleet, she subconsciously felt a trace of nervousness and uneasiness. She had a vague feeling that there was a vague danger ahead, like a pitch-black abyss waiting for her to step into. This sudden premonition, moreover, it was a crisis. She immediately became vigilant. Premonitions were illusory things that couldn't be seen or touched. However, after reaching her level of strength and condensing 3 strands of Taoist rhyme, she could naturally sense the heavenly Tao. It was natural for her to suddenly feel a sense of danger when danger was about to arrive, and it had happened more than once. The Prajna God Emperor wasn't overly suspicious. Without hesitation, she chose to believe in her premonitions and premonitions. She raised her eyebrows and was about to ask Qi Xia to stop the battleship. She would make the appropriate decision after she investigated the situation and figured out the source of the danger. However, the danger came so suddenly that she was caught off guard. Just as she called out Crimson Afterglow's name, before she could stop him, a sudden change occurred in front of her. Whoosh! Between the majestic mountain ranges, a dazzling divine light shot into the sky. The dazzling brilliance covered a radius of 30,000 miles and instantly formed a massive divine array, like a giant bowl overturned on the ground. As the 5-colored semicircle of light flowed, it released a terrifying divine power that pressed down. The Prajna God Emperor's battleship was also suppressed, as if it had sunk into a quagmire, its speed dropping by 80%. There really is an ambush. A cold glint flashed in the Prajna God Emperor's eyes as a chilling murderous intent erupted from her body. It's a trap. Qi Xia was instantly alerted. Her eyes widened as her expression turned grave. Without any warning, she steered the battleship straight into the enemy's trap. At this moment, she was both shocked and furious, as well as a little regretful. The master and disciple's first reaction was that this must be a trap set by the Kongming Temple to kill the Prajna God Emperor while she was on her way back to the fleet. Since she was unwilling to join the Kongming Temple, she was an enemy of the Kongming Temple. If you can't have it, destroy it. This was the life creed of many powerful people. Therefore, after Qi Xia came to her senses, she immediately controlled the array to steer the battleship away from the range of the array. However, this massive array of 30,000 miles was a quasi-emperor divine array. Not only was it composed of 3 Supreme King-level divine arrays, but it also contained the power of the heavenly Tao. Its divine power was vast and unfathomable. This divine array didn't have much offensive power. It only had the effect of sealing off heaven and earth and suppressing everything. Then, another array of the same level was activated. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. 100,000 dazzling swords of light suddenly lit up in the area of 30,000 miles, weaving into a massive sword net. Each sword light was 10,000 feet long. 100,000 swords of light gathered together to form a massive sword array and unleash an astonishing attack. Swish 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 swish. Tens of thousands of swords of light danced, carrying the power to destroy everything as they began to attack the Prajna God Emperor's battleship. Seeing this, Qi Xia gave up on running away without hesitation. Instead, she steered the battleship to form a shield and used all her strength to defend against the swords of light. The Prajna God Emperor was in no hurry to attack. Instead, she frowned as she stared at the two arrays and observed the swords of light. For some reason, when she saw the hundreds of thousands of sword lights dancing in the sky, she felt that they were somewhat familiar. The path of the swords of light, the network of the sword array, and the aura of the swords of light all seemed familiar. At this moment, her resolve wavered. She suddenly felt that the trap and ambush here might not be the work of the Kongming Temple. It was more like the work of someone she once knew, someone hidden in the depths of her heart. Chapter 4489. Bo-Ri God Emperor's heart that was as calm as an ancient well suddenly cracked and rippled. She knew that person was far away in the God realm, perhaps still busy unifying the God realm and setting new rules for the various continents. No matter what, that person couldn't have appeared here, much less set up a trap here. However, the ceiling formation in front of her and the sword formation formed by the 100,000 sword lights were very real and familiar to her. While she was in a daze, the divine worship had just formed a defensive barrier when the sword glows came crashing down. Bam! 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 Rumble rumble rumble. With deafening booms, the endless sword glows slammed into the divine worship's defensive barrier, causing it to explode into fragments of divine light. The defensive light barrier with a radius of 3,000 meters only lasted for a breath of time before it was shattered into pieces by the sword light that filled the sky, causing dense cracks to appear on its surface. Then, even more divine sword glows slammed into Pan-Ri God Emperor's worship. The Supreme Grade King worship shuddered violently, and cracks began to appear on its surface. Crimson Dawn's face paled. He wanted to control the worship to form another barrier, but it was too late. More and more divine sword glows slammed into the worship, causing it to sway from side to side as the cracks on its surface continued to expand. Crimson Dawn was powerless to stop the assault of the two arrays. He could only turn to his master behind him. If Pan-Ri God Emperor did not act, the ceiling array and the sword array would probably tear the worship to shreds. Fortunately, Pan-Ri God Emperor finally came to her senses and began to cast her arts. She temporarily suppressed the distracting thoughts in her mind and sat cross-legged in the worship. She formed a divine seal with both hands, releasing endless divine power in every direction. Whoosh! In the blink of an eye, the dazzling five-colored divine light condensed into a huge light shield that protected the entire divine worship. Pan-Ri Emperor God's five-colored light barrier also contained a trace of Tao rhyme and possessed the power of heavenly Tao. As a result, the tens of thousands of sword lights that filled the sky and shuttled back and forth were all blocked by the multicolored light shield. They could no longer harm the battleship. Crimson Dawn heaved a sigh of relief, but did not dare to delay. He hurriedly controlled the array to repair the damage to the divine worship. Next, the battle became a contest between Pan-Ri God Emperor and the two arrays. Ji Tianqing remained hidden in the dark, expressionless as he watched Pan-Ri God Emperor's worship. He silently controlled the ceiling array and the heaven-destroying sword array to attack continuously. Pan-Ri God Emperor's strength was indeed not to be underestimated. Her divine power seemed to be endless, and it was like raging waves, each wave stronger than the one before it. Even if the five-colored light barrier that she conjured was constantly being bombarded with holes and cracks by the sword light, she could quickly repair it. In short, she held on for a full 45 minutes, her divine power was still surging, without any decrease in the slightest. The five-colored barrier protected the warship, preventing it from being damaged further. Under Crimson Dawn's repair, the warship gradually recovered to normal. At this time, Crimson Dawn finally had a chance to catch her breath. She hurriedly took out a communication jade slip to send a message to Marshals Wu and Marshal Shi, ordering them to come to her aid. However, Pan-Ri God Emperor could still spare some attention to this matter. She said in a dignified tone, "There is no need to send a message to them. They are now in seclusion to heal their injuries. Even if they come, it will be useless. Not only will they not solve the problem, they will also become a burden." Crimson Dawn felt that this made sense, so she dismissed the idea of sending a message to the two marshals. After all, the soldiers were all seriously injured, and there were not many available. Moreover, the two arrays that had ambushed them were quasi-emperor divine arrays with unfathomable power. Even if the two marshals arrived with a group of elite soldiers, they would not be able to break the divine arrays from the outside. The greater possibility was that the two marshals and the soldiers they brought with them would be easily killed by the ambushers and they would lose their lives for nothing. Thinking of this, Crimson Dawn was somewhat puzzled. She could not help but ask, "Master, if the experts of the Kongming Temple were lying in ambush here, why did they only set up a large array and not appear?" Pan-Ri God Emperor continued to cast spells to resist the two large arrays. She replied expressionlessly, "Although at the beginning, I also guessed that it was the experts of the Kongming Temple who had set up an ambush here. However, from the looks of it now, they might not be from the Kongming Temple. I have a general understanding of the mystic arts of the desolate race, as well as the habits and thoughts of casting spells. Therefore, I can conclude that these two divine arrays are not the work of the experts of the Kongming Temple. It is more likely that they are experts from the divine realm. Furthermore, they are people who have grasped the profound meaning of the sword to be able to set up such a sword array." Hearing the last sentence, Crimson Dawn frowned. A glint flashed in her eyes as she suddenly came to a realization. "Master, a person who has grasped the profound meaning of the sword? Could you be talking about that person?" After pausing for a moment, Crimson Dawn could not help but shake her head. Her face was filled with disbelief as she said, "That is impossible. That is absolutely impossible. That person has just ruled the divine realm. He must be reorganizing the various continents and establishing new rules to consolidate his hegemony. How could he have left the divine realm? How could he have come to the Star of Origin?" Pan-Ri God Emperor naturally understood this point. Therefore, she was only guessing and did not dare to confirm it. Since Crimson Dawn was pressing, she could only explain, "I am only guessing and cannot confirm it. However, don't worry. Since the other party has set up an ambush here and cannot defeat us for a long time, they will definitely appear later." Crimson Dawn nodded and did not say anything else. She continued to control the divine warship and coordinated with her master to launch a counterattack. Both sides were in a stalemate for another 15 minutes. However, it was still difficult to determine the victor. Pan-Ri God Emperor could not break through the heaven-destroying sword array and the sealing array. The divine warship could not escape from the two arrays. However, no matter how strong the heaven-destroying sword array was, it could not destroy Pan-Ri God Emperor's defensive light barrier. It could not harm her divine warship. Ji Tianqing, who was controlling the array in the dark, was unwilling to give up. He thought to himself, "I underestimated Pan-Ri's strength. It seems that she has at least condensed 2 Daoist rhymes. It might even be 3. Since the array could not do anything to Pan-Ri God Emperor, he could not keep stalling for time. Otherwise, the two marshals would sense that something was amiss. It was very likely that they would bring reinforcements. More importantly, if he delayed for too long, the temple master sent by the Kongming temple might also sense it. At that time, if the temple master of the Kongming temple got involved, the situation would become even more complicated. Therefore, Ji Tianqing could only reveal himself and appear in the sky in front of the divine worship. He stared at Pan Ri God Emperor's divine worship and said coldly, "Pan Ri, long time no see." It was these simple words that stunned Pan Ri God Emperor. She even forgot to continue casting her spell. Chapter 4490. The moment Ji Tianqing appeared, both the Prajna God Emperor and Crimson Dawn raised their eyebrows, their pupils constricting as they stared at him. The same thought flashed through their minds at the same time. He's finally appeared. After setting up an ambush here, the culprit who attacked them had finally appeared. However, neither the master nor disciple had expected this, nor could they believe their eyes, nor could they accept this result. The person who attacked them was actually Feiyang Shenhuang. That's right, it was Feiyang Shenhuang who was highly regarded and trusted by Crimson Dawn. At the same time, it was also the main culprit behind the battle between the Prajna fleet and Qin Yu Hall. To everyone's knowledge, this person who had first provoked Qin Yu Hall and participated in many battles had already died on the battlefield, reduced to ashes. Before returning to the fleet, Crimson Dawn had sent a message to the two marshals asking about Feiyang Shenhuang's whereabouts. The two marshals had replied very confidently that Feiyang Shenhuang had died in the battle long ago, and even his bones could not be found. But now, godly King Feiyang had appeared unscathed. Of course. If it was only because of this, it would only cause a great shock to the Prajna God Emperor and Crimson Dawn. It would not be enough to cause the Prajna God Emperor to be stunned and reveal a flaw in her mental state. Most importantly, the Feiyang Shenhuang in front of them was definitely not the real Feiyang Shenhuang. Not only did he have the strength and aura of a God Emperor, but he could also set up two quasi-emperor level formations. Especially his posture and dignified aura, it was definitely not something that Feiyang Shenhuang could possess. And what shocked the Prajna God Emperor the most were those 5 words. Long time no see, Prajna. In today's world, only those God Emperors had the qualifications and dared to call her Prajna. Moreover, the other party's tone was so familiar, and the words long time no see indicated that they had known each other for many years but had not seen each other for many years. With the wisdom of the Prajna God Emperor, as well as her familiarity with that person, her first reaction was that the Feiyang Shenhuang in front of her was a fake. It was that person, in disguise. Thus, the Prajna God Emperor subconsciously exclaimed, Kenshin. Long Tian. It's actually you. However, Ji Tianqing did not respond to her, nor did he say anything else. When he shouted those 5 words, it was precisely to purposely destroy Hanya God Emperor's mental state, for the sake of breaking through the defensive barrier she condensed. He had already brought out the sword of burial of heaven and poured all of his strength into the divine sword. He slashed at the Prajna God Emperor's flagship. Boom! Before the Prajna God Emperor and Crimson Afterglow could react, the sword light that contained the might of the heavenly way struck the 5-colored light barrier formed by the Prajna God Emperor. With a deafening sound, the 5-colored light barrier was split in half. Countless cracks appeared in the huge gap, and tens of thousands of shards of divine light burst out. The defensive barrier that the heaven-destroying sword formation had been unable to break through was finally broken. The Prajna God Emperor, who was completely stunned and lost her mental state, also suffered from the backlash of her power. Her body shook, and her face turned ghastly pale. However, this also brought her back to her senses. She immediately glared at Ji Tianqing and shouted angrily, Long Tian, you're despicable. At this moment, she no longer had the spare energy to think about how Kenshin had appeared here. How and when did Kenshin enter the planet of origin? How did he find her so accurately, And how did he disguise himself as Feiyang Shenhuang to create this series of conspiracies? There were too many questions that the Prajna God Emperor suppressed in her heart. She only knew that Kenshin had purposely shouted those 5 words, taking advantage of her distraction to launch a sneak attack on her. This was too despicable. The Prajna God Emperor was furious, but she also knew that it was impossible for her to create another barrier. Seeing Ji Tianqing swing his sword again and unleash a few heaven-shattering sword auras, she rushed out of the divine worship without hesitation and formed a seal with her hands to block. Swish! Dressed in a red dress, Prajna appeared in the sky in her true form. She was extremely graceful and beautiful, and the red dot on her forehead made her look even more noble and holy. Her face was as cold as ice, and her hands lit up with 5-colored divine light. She quickly cast a spell, manipulating the divine power of heaven and earth to form a 10,000-foot-tall golden divine seal in front of her. The giant golden divine seal stood between Ji Tianqing and her, keeping the divine worship behind it. Bang, bang, bang. Ji Tianqing's 3 heaven-shattering swords were meant to destroy the Prajna God Emperor's divine worship, but they struck the golden divine seal, creating an earth-shattering boom. The 10,000-foot-long divine sword exploded, filling the sky with fragments of divine light. The Prajna God Emperor's golden divine seal was also cleaved in half, turning into specks of divine light that dissipated into the world. There was no doubt that the 2 of them had used their full strength, but it was a draw. Such an outcome caused Emperor God Pan Ruo's eyes to widen and he revealed a look of disbelief. Long Tian. You were just a peak God King not long ago. How could you have broken through to the God Emperor realm so quickly? The Prajna God Emperor had long expected that the 6th God Emperor would be Kenshin Long Tian. But she had calculated that no matter how heaven-defying Long Tian's talent was, he would need to cultivate for several hundred years before breaking through. But now, in just a few short years, Long Tian had broken through to the God Emperor realm. What shocked her the most was that Long Tian had just become a God Emperor, but he was already on par with her. This was simply too absurd. The Prajna God Emperor's state of mind rose and fell like a raging sea. God King Crimson Dawn also recognized the reality and woke up from her shock. She glared angrily at Ji Tianqing and cursed with hatred, Long Tian. You despicable and shameless bastard. You are a disgrace to the name of the Kenshin. How could you do such a despicable thing? No wonder Feiyang Shenhuang was able to cheat me of my trust and take the initiative to provoke a conflict with Qin Yu Hall after we left the fleet. So it turns out that you have already possessed Divine King Feiyang's body and deliberately created a conflict. It was your scheme that caused the fleet and Qin Yu Hall to fight until both sides were injured. You are too sinister and vicious. God King Crimson Dawn was able to guess the cause and the truth of the matter in just a few short moments. She had seen through Ji Tianqing's scheme. But it was already too late for her and the Prajna God Emperor to find out the truth. Ji Tianqing's expression was indifferent as he swung his sword and attacked. He only said one sentence. We are enemies to begin with. What's the point of talking about morality? This sentence left the master and disciple duo speechless. They could not refute or retaliate. That's right, they were not friends or allies. They were mortal enemies. Of course, they would do anything for revenge. What was wrong with that? Ji Tianqing's left hand unleashed all sorts of mystic arts and secret techniques while his right hand waved the burial of heaven. He unleashed a series of swordsmanship techniques against the Prajna God Emperor. He was like a fish in water within the heaven-sealing formation and the heaven-destroying sword formation. He was like the ruler of this world. Meanwhile, the Prajna God Emperor and God King Crimson Dawn were suppressed within the formation and their strength was greatly reduced. As expected, Ji Tianqing quickly gained the upper hand. Chapter 4491. The Prajna God Emperor was suppressed by the 2 arrays and was unable to unleash her full strength. She was constantly being suppressed by Ji Tianqing. She could not turn the tables, nor could she break through the heaven-vanquishing sword array and the heaven-sealing array. Qi Xia was also in a difficult situation. She was in the Prajna God Emperor's ship and had the protection of the divine ship. However, the Prajna God Emperor could not conjure a divine light barrier to protect the divine ship. The divine ship could only endure the attacks of the 10,000 rays of sword light. It was riddled with holes and filled with cracks. Even though godly monarch Crimson Afterglow and the 20 elite guards tried their best to cast spells to defend and repair the divine warship as quickly as possible, it was useless. They could only delay the destruction of the divine ship slightly, but they could not resolve the crisis. As time passed, the damage and cracks on the divine ship grew larger and larger. Qi Xia and the 20 guards could not keep up with the speed of repair and became more and more flustered. Finally, when the divine ship's damage reached its limit, it shattered under the attacks of the dozens of rays of sword light. Kacha, kacha. The entire divine ship broke into pieces and countless pieces of the divine ship flew everywhere. The 20 elite guards were also engulfed by the rays of sword light and were torn to pieces. They let out cries of pain and a dark red mist of blood. Even though Qi Xia had the strength of a peak divine king, she was still struck by the dozens of rays of sword light. Her protective divine light was destroyed and she was badly injured. Her body was drenched in blood. In the blink of an eye, the entire divine ship was torn to shreds and scattered in the heaven-vanquishing sword array. The 12 guards were torn to pieces by the sword light. Their deaths were too horrible to look at. Not even their corpses were left intact. The 8 guards who were lucky enough to survive were also seriously injured. They gathered together to defend against the attacks of the sword light. However, it was all in vain. The divine sword light that blotted out the sky quickly engulfed their figures. After 2 breaths, the 8 guards no longer existed. They were reduced to a rain of blood and dust that dissipated into the world. Only the injured Qi Xia was left. She was still bitterly holding on, using all her strength to defend against the sword light. The Prajna God Emperor saw that she was having a hard time. Under the attack of the countless sword lights, her injuries were worsening. If another 10 breaths of time passed, her divine body would very likely collapse. With no other choice, Prajna God Emperor could only divert a portion of his energy to help Crimson Dawn God King relieve half of the pressure. The pressure on Qi Xia Deity King was greatly reduced, and only then was he able to move. He quickly approached his master. But even so, godly monarch Crimson Afterglow's strength was still constantly draining away. His combat strength was becoming weaker and weaker. A quarter of an hour later, she had almost no energy left to resist the sword light that filled the sky. She could only support the suppression of the double array. There was nothing she could do about it. Ji Tianqing had set up 2 large formations 20 days in advance. Both of them contained the powerful might of the heavenly Tao and had an extremely strong suppressive force on her. Prajna God Emperor had no choice but to shoulder more of the pressure and do his best to protect Crimson Dawn. Unknowingly, the 2 sides had already fought for nearly 2 hours. The power of the heaven-sealing formation and the heaven-vanquishing sword formation had not weakened. They were able to absorb the power of heaven and earth within a radius of 1,000,000 miles, which meant that they had an endless supply of power. Prajna God Emperor's divine power was gradually depleting, and her battle prowess began to weaken. She was constantly being suppressed by Ji Tianqing and was about to be injured soon. Prajna God Emperor could not believe or accept such an outcome. She could only think of ways to stall for time. As she fought with Ji Tianqing, she asked, "Long Tian, I still don't understand. Why are you not in the heavenly realm? Why are you here? I have spent close to 1,000 years of effort and the efforts of tens of thousands of soldiers to finally break through the defenses of the Star of Origin and successfully enter the Star of Origin. How did you do it?" Ji Tianqing becoming a god emperor in such a short period of time had already exceeded her expectations. Now, Ji Tianqing was also able to break through the defenses of the Star of Origin and enter the Star of Origin. This was simply unbelievable. Ji Tianqing continued to attack expressionlessly. He asked indifferently, "Who told you that I had to break through the defenses of the Star of Origin to enter?" Hearing this, Prajna God Emperor frowned and said subconsciously, "What do you mean? Can you easily break through the defenses of the Star of Origin and enter the Star of Origin? That's impossible. I and the other 4 God Emperors have tried. It's impossible." Pausing for a moment, she suddenly thought of another possibility and suddenly understood. "I understand. After you conquered the heavenly realm, you did not stay in the heavenly realm. You immediately rushed into the depths of the void to find us. After you found us and saw that we had successfully opened a gap, you followed us into the Star of Origin. That must be it." Ji Tianqing did not reply, which meant that he had tacitly agreed with her guess. In fact, Prajna God Emperor was just shocked and agitated. She had been in a state of battle and did not have time to think about it. If she had calmed down after the incident, she would have thought of this. Seeing that Ji Tianqing had tacitly agreed, Prajna God Emperor felt more confident. She continued, "You have been following my fleet until we entered the 7 Moons Mountain. Perhaps you had already thought of a way to sneak into the fleet and possess Feiyang Shenhuang. Or perhaps, you were hiding in the dark and waited for me and Crimson Afterglow to leave before sneaking into my fleet. However, after thinking about it, I still think that the possibility of you sneaking into the fleet ahead of time is higher. After all, before I left the fleet and went to the Kongming Temple, Feiyang Shenhuang's behavior was somewhat abnormal. At that time, I noticed this but did not think much of it. I also did not expect that Feiyang Shenhuang had already been possessed by you." Mentioning what had happened before, Crimson Afterglow was filled with regret and hatred. She glared at Ji Tianqing and cursed, "Long Tian. In any case, you are a peerless expert who made a name for yourself 1,000 years ago. In front of me, you are a senior. But you actually pretended to be Feiyang Shenhuang and purposely got close to me to gain my trust. Then, you sowed discord and caused such tragic consequences. Where is your dignity and grace as a senior? You are too shameless, too despicable." Ji Tianqing glanced at Crimson Afterglow indifferently and said, "You are still too young. You." Crimson Afterglow was furious, but there was nothing she could do. She could only glare at Ji Tianqing angrily and pant. Prajna God Emperor knew that there was no point in continuing this topic. It would only make people angrier. Thus, she continued to ask Ji Tianqing, "You have only broken through to the God Emperor realm in the past 2 years. At most, you have condensed a strand of Taoist rhyme. But I have already condensed 3 strands of Taoist rhyme. Even if you set up 2 divine formations in advance, it is impossible to suppress me. Long Tian, how did you do it? Do you know some secret, or, is the heaven punishing formation in your hands?" Prajna God Emperor and the other 4 God Emperors had already discussed this. Back then, they had only snatched half of a divine item from Kenshin. It was called the Eternal Heavenly Tome. The other half of the divine item, the heaven punishing formation, was missing. Chapter 4492. The 5 God Emperors had never seen the true face of the heaven punishment formation, nor did they know its contents. But they guessed that since the first half of the eternal heavenly scripture could allow them to break through to the God Emperor realm, then the second half of the heaven punishment formation must have even more unfathomable power. Long Tian's various monstrous performances after returning to the God realm made them increasingly suspicious that the heaven punishment formation was in Long Tian's hands. Otherwise, the 5 God Emperors had used all sorts of methods and the God of the underworld had even used the Heaven Punisher race to set up a massive layout in the lower realms. There was no way they couldn't find the Heaven Punishment formation. Now that the Pan-God Emperor had seen Ji Tianqing's heaven-defying performance, it was only natural that she would have such a thought. Ji Tianqing knew that even if he denied it, the Pan-God Emperor wouldn't believe him. Thus, he didn't answer the Pan-God Emperor's question. He only sneered, "Back in the God realm, I was still a peak God King, but I was already able to defeat your avatar. Now that I've broken through to the initial God Emperor realm, we're on the same level. You've only condensed 1 or 2 more Daos than me, so what's so strange about me being able to suppress you?" The Pan-God Emperor thought that this made sense. Ever since Long Tian's rebirth, his performance had been monstrous. There was only a difference of 2 Daos between her and Long Tian. In any case, they were both at the initial God Emperor realm. With Long Tian's monstrous aptitude and talent, it was understandable that he could firmly suppress her. Even though the Pan-God Emperor understood this, she was still very angry when she heard Ji Tianqing's words, especially his tone. She looked coldly at Ji Tianqing and said in a low voice, "Long Tian, this emperor admits that you're very strong right now, and this emperor might not be your match. But don't forget that you and I are both at the initial God Emperor realm and have grasped the power of the heavenly Tao. At our level, although we haven't reached eternal life, we're not easy to kill. If you want to kill me, you're dreaming." Ji Tianqing had been expressionless until he heard these words. Finally, he sneered. "Hanya, you're right. With my current strength, I can only suppress and defeat you. I don't have the confidence to kill you. But the goal of my plan doesn't necessarily have to be to kill you. As long as we can destroy your soldiers, cut off your foundation, and make you a loner, you will not be able to establish yourself on the star of origin, let alone realize your ambitions. Moreover, even if I can't kill you today, it doesn't mean that I can't kill you in a few years." As he spoke, he suddenly unleashed a powerful godly power. While dealing with the Prajna God Emperor, he also stabbed Qi Xia God King a few times. The Prajna God Emperor was unable to react in time and his defense was immediately broken by the sword light. He was unable to protect godly monarch Crimson Dawn. With 2 dull thuds, Crimson Afterglow was struck by the sword light. His body trembled violently as blood spewed from his nose and mouth. Crimson Afterglow was already heavily injured. After suffering such heavy injuries, his face was as white as a sheet of paper and his aura was extremely weak. The Prajna God Emperor frowned fiercely as the anger in her heart grew. Ji Tianqing's actions were undoubtedly telling her that even if he couldn't kill her, he could easily kill her most beloved disciple. But the situation was not good. The Prajna God Emperor could only suppress her anger and ask in a cold voice, "Long Tian. Don't you dare slander me. When did this emperor have any ambitions? Other than seeking eternal life, that is the goal that all godly kings and God Emperor pursue. What kind of ambition is that? Moreover, you know that it was Yu Ming, Azura, Dao Xingyun, and Lu Jiuyang who planned to kill you. Why didn't you seek revenge on them? Why did you only target me and follow me to the star of origin? Don't tell me that as the famous Kenshin, you are also someone who bullies the weak and fears the strong." With the Prajna God Emperor's proud and aloof personality, she had never said such words before. Even if she wasn't the mastermind behind the plan to kill the Kenshin, but was forced by circumstances to cooperate with the 4 God Emperors, she had never said anything. She had only announced to the outside world that she had a grudge against the Kenshin and that she had participated in the plot. But today, she had spoken the truth about the situation and her thoughts. From this, it could be seen that she wasn't afraid of death or worried about her own safety. She cared deeply about Crimson Dawn's life. Ji Tianqing saw the clues and frowned as he stared at Crimson Dawn, silently recalling the events of the past. For the Prajna God Emperor to care so much about Crimson Dawn made him wonder if Crimson Dawn had any other identity besides being Prajna's favorite disciple. But Ji Tianqing carefully recalled for a moment and sorted out Crimson Dawn's identity and background, and the process of him becoming Prajna's disciple. He was sure that there was no other relationship between the two. After all, when the Prajna God Emperor took Crimson Dawn as his disciple, he had just separated from the God Emperor not long ago. He was also very clear about the matter of Prajna taking in a disciple. After dispelling the misgivings in his heart, Ji Tianqing looked at the Prajna God Emperor and asked, "Why do you care so much about Crimson Dawn's life? Logically speaking, as an expert of the God Emperor, you should be indifferent to everything. How can you still have the emotions of a mortal?" The Prajna God Emperor sneered, "You are now also an initial God Emperor. Could it be that you have already extinguished the 7 emotions and 6 desires, completely eliminating mortal emotions? If that was the case, wouldn't you have abandoned your wife and children long ago?" Ji Tianqing frowned, not intending to answer her question. The Prajna God Emperor continued, "After I broke off with you, it was this emperor's darkest, most lost, most dejected, and most helpless period. It was precisely at that time that this emperor realized the coldness and selfishness of the human heart. Being full of sincerity definitely won't be enough to exchange for someone else's sincerity. If one is too naive, the one who will be hurt in the end will only be oneself." It was also during that period that this emperor met Crimson Dawn, who was similarly hurt and similarly lost. At that time, she was too pure and too kind. When I saw her, this emperor felt as if I was looking at my younger self. Perhaps it was precisely because of this that we became master and disciple. From then on, this emperor secretly made the decision to teach Crimson Dawn with all of my strength, to protect her. Apart from this, there is no one else in this world that is worthy of sincerity." The Prajna God Emperor sneered, speaking these words with a complicated tone. Of course, Ji Tianqing could tell that these were her true thoughts. There was absolutely no element of disguise. Of course, it was also because the current situation was special, with only him, Prajna, and Crimson Dawn here. Ji Tianqing believed that after today, in a different situation, with the Prajna God Emperor's nature, she definitely wouldn't say such words again. He immediately became silent, looking at the Prajna God Emperor with a complicated expression. In a daze, he seemed to have returned to 1,000 years ago, seeing the Prajna God Emperor who was still somewhat young and inexperienced. Even though he didn't know what the Prajna God Emperor experienced in those several decades after he broke off with her. But he could guess that the Prajna God Emperor must have been very depressed during that period of time, very torturous. There was already no meaning in arguing about who was right and who was wrong about the matters of the past. Book Guest House Reading Website. Chapter 4493. The past could not be recalled. Ji Tianqing understood that the Prajna God Emperor was not admitting her wrongs or repenting by saying these words. In all fairness, it was more like the Prajna God Emperor was admitting defeat and pleading for mercy. She was in an undefeatable position. Even if she was suppressed by Ji Tianqing, her life would not be in danger. But other than herself, the one she cared about the most was Crimson Dawn. Although Ji Tianqing could not kill her, he had absolute confidence that he could kill Crimson Dawn. Ji Tianqing fell silent. He no longer argued with the Prajna God Emperor and continued to attack with an indifferent expression. The Prajna God Emperor's pressure grew greater and greater. Crimson Dawn's injuries also grew more and more serious. She gradually lost her ability to fight. She no longer had the strength to defend against Ji Tianqing's attacks. She could not even block the might of the Great Heaven-sealing formation and the heaven-destroying sword formation. In at most 100 breaths of time, the Prajna God Emperor would not be able to protect her. At that time, she would definitely be torn to shreds by the light and shadows of divine techniques. Of course, the Prajna God Emperor had also considered putting Crimson Dawn into her divine tool and letting her fight with Ji Tianqing alone. But Ji Tianqing had long been prepared for this. He had been suppressing the Prajna God Emperor from beginning to end, so that she could not be distracted. If she dared to forcefully open the inner space of the divine tool and put Crimson Dawn inside, she would definitely expose a big flaw. In that case, she would definitely reveal an even bigger flaw, allowing Ji Tianqing to take advantage of it and injure her severely. Her life might even be in danger. Under such circumstances, the Prajna God Emperor became more and more anxious and helpless. She angrily shouted, "Long Tian! Do you really want to kill us, master and disciple? You want to take revenge on this emperor? This is a grudge between us. This emperor has nothing to say. But what wrong did Crimson Dawn do? What happened back then had nothing to do with her." Ji Tianqing remained silent. He continued to use all kinds of divine techniques to attack the master and disciple. A few hours ago, Marshal Zhua and Marshal Shi had been waiting anxiously for the return of the Prajna God Emperor. They estimated that after the Prajna God Emperor passed by 7 Moon Mountain, they would arrive at the fleet in 2 hours. However, 2 hours had passed, and there was still no sign of the divine warship in the northern sky. Marshal Zhua, Marshal Shi, and the more than 20 divine generals who were waiting eagerly were all puzzled. Everyone was guessing if there was a deviation in the calculation of time. Or perhaps the God Emperor's ship was delayed on the way. It was also possible that the God Emperor couldn't hold back his anger and charged into 7 Moon Mountain to deal with the people of Qin Yu Hall. All 3 guesses were possible. However, no one could be sure, so they could only continue to wait and silently pray that nothing unexpected would happen. Time trickled by. Soon, another 15 minutes had passed. Given the speed of the Prajna God Emperor's ship, even if there were some delays on the way, they should have arrived by now. However, the Prajna God Emperor and Crimson Dawn still hadn't returned. Marshal Shi, Marshal Zhua, and the other divine generals were panicking. The third guess kept circling in their minds, and they couldn't get rid of it. Everyone gathered together and discussed for a while. They were increasingly certain that the God Emperor had most likely charged into 7 Moon Mountain to destroy Qin Yu Hall. Given the Prajna God Emperor's nature, he definitely hated Qin Yu Hall to the core. Moreover, he was the Supreme God Emperor. He had enough power to deal with Qin Yu Hall. Thinking of this, the divine generals felt their blood boil. They were full of anticipation. In their hearts, the Prajna God Emperor was their greatest backer. She was also a symbol of strength and invincibility. Previously, when they were bullied by Qin Yu Hall, they had fantasized countless times about how good it would be if the Prajna God Emperor was in charge of the fleet. She could easily destroy Qin Yu Hall. Now, the Prajna God Emperor had finally returned to avenge the soldiers and destroy Qin Yu Hall. How could they not be excited? The divine generals were so excited that they urged the 2 marshals to lead the fleet to support the Prajna God Emperor. Even though most of the soldiers were recuperating from their injuries, there were still some soldiers who could pilot the ship. When the time came to attack Qin Yu Hall, the soldiers didn't need to fight. They only needed to pilot the ship to attack and support the Prajna God Emperor. After all, the marshals were going to fight personally. The soldiers under their command had to charge as well. Otherwise, it would be the same as Pan Ruo Divine Emperor flattening the Pure Moon Hall, but his fleet didn't respond at all. That would definitely anger Pan Ruo. The 20-odd divine generals' suggestion was very reasonable. The 2 marshals were a little swayed. They didn't dare to make the decision on their own. They sent out communication jade slips to ask the Prajna God Emperor whether they needed the fleet to support the Prajna God Emperor. However, the 2 marshals sent out 3 communication jade slips one after another, but all of them were like stones sinking into the sea, and there was no response. This made the 2 marshals and the divine generals panic. They were even more certain of their guess. The Prajna God Emperor was definitely attacking Qin Yu Hall. That was why she didn't have time to reply. Therefore, the 2 marshals didn't hesitate anymore. They quickly gathered more than 20 divine generals and commanded dozens of soldiers to pilot the warships. In a short while, the fleet of 50 warships was led by the 2 marshals and headed straight for 7 Moon Mountain. Along the way, the soldiers were filled with excitement and anticipation. They imagined the scene of the Prajna God Emperor going on a killing spree and the scene of 7 Moon Mountain being destroyed. They felt very relieved. The soldiers piloting the divine warships kept increasing their speed. They wanted to reach 7 Moon Mountain as soon as possible so that they wouldn't miss the show. Everyone knew that they might not be of much use even if they participated in the battle. However, they had to show their attitude and boost the God Emperor's morale. Most importantly, the soldiers wanted to see the tragic scene of Qin Yu Hall being destroyed with their own eyes. About an hour later, the fleet was only halfway there. They were still 5 million miles away from 7 Moon Mountain. At this moment, the two marshals and the divine generals saw a huge array with a radius of 30,000 miles in front of them. That should be a sealing array. The semicircular 5-colored barrier covered the ground and kept absorbing the power of heaven and earth from all directions. The grade of the array was extremely high. It released a terrifying suppressive force that contained an indescribable divine might. However, no one could see the situation inside the sealing array. However, the formation was shining brightly, and muffled booms and explosions could be heard from time to time. The two marshals and the many soldiers were experienced. They immediately concluded that there must be experts fighting inside the array. What's going on? Why would someone set up an array here and fight with others? Looking at the grade of the sealing array, it's obviously beyond the supreme grade king level. It also contains a wisp of heavenly Tao's might. Therefore, it must be the array set up by the God Emperor. The two marshals looked at each other and realized that the situation was not good. They frowned worriedly. The array set up by the God Emperor. The God Emperor just returned from the Kongming Temple and passed by here not long ago. This array is definitely not set up by her. So, there's only one possibility. The God Emperor of the Kongming Temple set up the array here to ambush the God Emperor. Chapter 44-94. Marshal Zhua and Marshal Shi were both peak divine kings and had rich battle experience. In the blink of an eye, they had analyzed the truth through the array in front of them. Thus, the two marshals' hearts suddenly jumped, and their expressions also became serious. Damn it! Why would the Kongming Temple send a God Emperor expert to ambush the God Emperor here? I understand now. We fought with Qin Yu Hall until both sides suffered losses. The God Emperor was unwilling to join the Kongming Temple, which caused the Kongming Temple to be angry and dissatisfied. Since they could not subdue the God Emperor, and both sides had a grudge against each other, the Kongming Temple chose to strike first to gain the upper hand and eliminate us. As expected of an overlord. The Kongming Temple's actions are indeed unyielding and domineering. What are we waiting for? We must use all our strength to break that array and help the God Emperor out of this predicament. Nothing must happen to the God Emperor. Otherwise, without our leader and backer, we will be at the mercy of the Kongming Temple, like ants that can be squashed to death at any time. After a brief discussion, the two marshals reached a consensus. They immediately ordered the fleet to get into battle formation and attack the sealing array with all their might. Swish swish swish. The 50 warships quickly got into formation and fired their divine cannons at the same time, releasing beams of divine power that filled the sky. Thousands of beams of light, carrying the power to destroy heaven and earth, hit the sealing array with a loud bang. Bam! 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 Boom! Boom! Deafening booms exploded one after another, reverberating endlessly between heaven and earth. The beams of light released by the 50 warships at the same time crashed into the sealing array, but they did not cause any damage. The 5-colored light barrier only trembled a few dozen times, creating layers of ripples and ripples. Not even a crack appeared. Such a powerful force confirmed everyone's guess. That was an emperor-level array. With this thought in mind, the two marshals and the many divine generals began to feel anxious. Reason told everyone that the strength of these soldiers and starships was not enough to shake the emperor-level grand array. However, as the officers and soldiers under the command of the Prajna God Emperor, they knew that the Prajna God Emperor was ambushed and was fighting with experts in the Great Formation. They could not just stand by and watch. Even if they knew that it would be futile, they had to do their best and think of every way to help the Prajna God Emperor deal with the enemy. The two marshals weren't discouraged and gave the order once more, commanding all the warships to attack with all their might. Boom boom boom. One pillar of divine power after another, bursting with dazzling flames, bombarded the Grand Sealing Formation with unstoppable momentum. The two marshals and the 20-odd god generals understood that even if their attacks couldn't break the sealing array, they could at least reduce a portion of the array's power. In this way, he could also reduce some of the pressure on Hanya God Emperor, and perhaps help Hanya God Emperor defeat the enemy. In truth, their thinking was correct. Ji Tianqing, the Prajna God Emperor, and God King Crimson Dawn all had different reactions when they noticed the fleet outside the array attacking. Ji Tianqing first frowned, but when he realized that the fleet's attack wasn't very strong and could only slightly affect the heaven sealing array, his brow relaxed. In fact, he even had another thought, and the corner of his mouth could not help but reveal a cold smile. The Prajna God Emperor and God King Crimson Dawn had completely opposite reactions. The two of them sensed that a fleet was attacking the sealing array and immediately realized that the two marshals had come to reinforce them. The master and disciple were delighted at first, and then they breathed a sigh of relief. Wonderful. We've been delayed for so long, but the two marshals have finally noticed something strange and come to our aid. However, they soon realized that the attack power of the remaining 50 warships was too weak. They couldn't threaten Ji Tianqing's formation at all. The master and disciples' hopes were immediately dashed. Even if the fleet came to their aid, they wouldn't be able to save them. The Prajna God Emperor then thought of an even more serious problem. Although Kenshin couldn't kill her, he could kill God King Crimson Dawn. As for the 50 divine warships outside the array, if Kenshin put in a little effort, he could also heavily injure and destroy them. At that time, just as Kenshin had said, she would truly be all alone. Thinking of this, Great Wisdom Emperor's expression changed abruptly, revealing a look of deep anxiety. She wanted very much to order the two marshals not to cause any more trouble and to immediately lead the fleet away from this place and hide as far away as possible. Unfortunately, she was unable to receive or check the communication jade slip sent by the two marshals earlier. Now that Ji Tianqing was suppressing her, she couldn't send a message to the two marshals. Just when the Prajna God Emperor was at her wit's end, Ji Tianqing suddenly used a supreme ability. Omnidirectional Vanishing Shadows. He finally abandoned Feiyang Shenhuang's divine body and revealed his true appearance. Moreover, his entire body lit up with dazzling divine light and instantly transformed into 9 doppelgangers. A total of 10 identical Ji Tianqing appeared in the array, each holding the sword of burial of heaven and smirking coldly. Although Ji Tianqing's doppelgangers only had half his strength, they were still quasi-emperors. Ji Tianqing's true body and one of his doppelgangers worked together to deal with the Prajna God Emperor. The other 2 doppelgangers worked together to deal with God King Crimson Dawn. As for the remaining 6 doppelgangers, they controlled the sky sealing array and worked together to attack the fleet outside the array. The Prajna God Emperor's expression changed dramatically at this sight. Her eyes widened and she couldn't help but cry out in alarm. No. Unfortunately, the Prajna God Emperor was suppressed by Ji Tianqing and one of his doppelgangers and could no longer escape. Even God King Crimson Dawn couldn't protect her. As for God King Crimson Dawn and the 50 warships outside the array, Pan Ruo God Emperor could only look on helplessly as they were surrounded and attacked by Ji Tianqing's clones, quickly dying and disintegrating. Bam! 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 Ji Tianqing's 2 doppelgangers worked together to attack God King Crimson Dawn. In less than 3 moves, God King Crimson Dawn was bleeding from her 7 orifices and fainted on the spot. Then, her divine body was reduced to dust amidst a sea of sword light, nomological laws, and Taoist rhymes. Her body turned into specks of divine light that dissipated into the world. God King Crimson Dawn's body had been destroyed, leaving only a cracked quintessence floating in the air. Her quintessence had been severely damaged and she had lost consciousness. The Prajna God Emperor was extremely anxious. She immediately used her arts to seize God King Crimson Dawn's quintessence. However, Ji Tianqing's doppelgangers were one step ahead of her and took God King Crimson Dawn's quintessence. Then, the two doppelgangers and the other 6 doppelgangers worked together to slaughter the fleet outside the array. Rumble. Kacha. Kacha. The sky-sealing array unleashed pillars of light that blasted the numerous warships. The 8 Ji Tianqing's doppelgangers scattered around the fleet and swung their divine swords, destroying one warship after another. Marshal Zhua, Marshal Shi, and the divine generals were all dumbfounded by the sudden appearance of Kenshin's doppelgangers. Chapter 4495. The 2 marshals and the many divine generals had thought that the one who had ambushed the Prajna God Emperor was the God Emperor of the Kongming Temple. But when the other party charged out of the sealing array and attacked them, they finally saw the face of the culprit. It was too shocking. It was that person no one had expected or imagined. Kenshin. The 2 marshals and the many god generals were dumbfounded on the spot. They simply couldn't react, nor could they understand why Kenshin, who was far away in the god realm, would appear here. Moreover, he had set up a trap here in advance to ambush the Prajna God Emperor at this critical moment. Even more frightening was the fact that Kenshin was a peak god king. How had he suddenly become a god emperor? While the 2 marshals and the divine generals were in a daze, Ji Tianqing's 8 clones had already slaughtered a large number of soldiers and divine warships. At least 3,000 soldiers were still recuperating in seclusion in their divine warships. They didn't know what was going on before they lost their lives in confusion. More than a dozen divine warships were pulverized into countless pieces of wreckage that littered the ground. Only then did the 2 marshals react. They shouted in horror and ordered the soldiers to retreat. Kenshin's clones were so powerful that they were able to deal with so many divine warships and soldiers as if they were vegetables. At such a critical juncture, the 2 marshals naturally had to preserve their strength. They could no longer be bothered to reinforce the Prajna God Emperor. Whoosh! 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 The 30-odd surviving divine warships turned around and flew south upon receiving the order. Ji Tianqing's 8 doppelgangers immediately tangled with the many divine warships and began to chase after them. The fleet hadn't gotten very far when they heard another series of rumbling and cracking sounds. Several more divine warships were smashed into smithereens, filling the sky with wreckage. Even the 1,000-odd soldiers on the divine warships were mercilessly annihilated. Most of them were reduced to ashes. As time passed, the fleet tried its best to escape, but it was unable to shake off Ji Tianqing's 8 doppelgangers. The godly warships were destroyed one after another, and the number of warships and soldiers decreased drastically. The 2 marshals and the many godly generals were scared out of their wits, and they were filled with despair. If it was any other time, they would still have hope and fantasize that the Prajna God Emperor would come and save them. But now, the Prajna God Emperor was still trapped in the sealing formation, and he didn't know what the situation was like. The only person the fleet could rely on could not even protect himself. Who else could save them? Because of this, the 2 marshals and the many god generals felt a deep sense of despair. Soon, 15 minutes passed. Ji Tianqing's 8 avatars chased after the fleet for hundreds of thousands of miles and successfully destroyed all the divine warships and soldiers. When there were only 2 divine warships left, the 2 marshals and the divine generals were in complete despair. They shouted loudly, wanting to surrender to the Kenshin. In order to survive, they had no other choice. However, Ji Tianqing's 8 clones remained silent and continued to cast spells to besiege him. Seeing that Kenshin would not accept their surrender, the two marshals and the many god generals were filled with grief and indignation. They could only choose to self-detonate and perish together with Kenshin's doppelgangers. Amidst the solemn atmosphere, the two divine warships activated their self-destructing divine formations. The two marshals and the many soldiers also self-destructed. Bang! Boom! 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 A series of earth-shattering booms followed by a series of explosions that reverberated through the world for hundreds of thousands of miles. One dazzling ball of divine light after another rose into the sky like mushroom clouds, unleashing destructive power that swept across the area for 100,000 miles. No one could accurately estimate the power of the self-detonation of the two divine warships and the many soldiers. But the area for 100,000 miles was instantly reduced to rubble, all the mountains and rivers pulverized. This area had become a barren desert. The dust and divine light that blotted out the sky persisted for a very long time before gradually dissipating. At this point, the Prajna God Emperor's fleet had been completely wiped out. The two marshals, several god generals, and many soldiers believed that they had died a worthy death, that they would at least be able to perish together with Kenshin's doppelgangers. But in reality, the moment they self-detonated, Ji Tianqing's 8 doppelgangers had sensed the danger and retreated ahead of time. The 8 doppelgangers instantly teleported in all directions, retreating tens of thousands of miles in the blink of an eye. When the two divine warships self-destructed, the power of the explosion spread out. The 8 clones had already retreated 70,000 miles away. Even though they had been swept away by the destructive shock waves, they had been relatively far away, had been on guard, and were very strong. Thus, they had not suffered too great of an injury, only minor ones, and had successfully retreated from the area of self-detonation. Within the heaven-destroying sword formation, God King Crimson Dawn's body had been destroyed long ago, and the only thing left was his unconscious godhead, which had been taken by Ji Tianqing. The Prajna God Emperor was so furious that her face was ghastly pale. She no longer held back and began a desperate counterattack. But Ji Tianqing and another doppelganger continued to suppress her, constantly exhausting her divine power and causing her injuries to worsen. Before long, she could faintly hear a muffled boom coming from the south of the formation. She suddenly sensed something, and a hint of understanding appeared in her mind. She froze, her body somewhat stiff. She had sensed the sound of several divine warships and soldiers self-detonating. This undoubtedly meant that her fleet had been forced into a corner and could only choose to perish together with the enemy. Regardless of whether or not the self-detonation of the divine warships and soldiers could cause any damage to Kenshin's doppelgangers. The annihilation of the fleet under her command was a foregone conclusion, and it had become a part of history. Boundless rage and deep despair welled up in her heart, causing the Prajna God Emperor's face to turn even paler. She couldn't help but vomit blood. Pfft, it's over. This Emperor's 1,000 years of painstaking effort are all gone. This was the only thought left in the Prajna God Emperor's mind. Taking advantage of her dazed state, Ji Tianqing did not stop his attacks. He and his doppelganger attacked from both sides, unleashing several divine swords that drowned out the Prajna God Emperor's figure. Bam bam! The Prajna God Emperor was unable to dodge in time and was struck by the 9 swords. The protective divine light around her body was shattered, and she was sent flying with a muffled groan. Several more wounds appeared on her body, and dark red blood seeped out, soaking her dress and cloak. The wounds on her chest and shoulders were wreathed in multicolored halos that did not dissipate for a long time. Those were the wounds caused by Ji Tianqing's Dao rime, which left behind Dao marks. These wounds were known as Dao wounds, and they were extremely difficult to heal. The appearance of Dao wounds further suppressed the Prajna God Emperor's power, affecting the flow of her divine power and causing her battle prowess to drop even further. Even though she reacted and focused on resisting Ji Tianqing's attacks, it was already difficult for her to reverse the situation. Time quietly passed. Half an hour later, the Prajna God Emperor's injuries were even more severe. There were as many as 16 Dao wounds on her body. At this moment, Ji Tianqing's 8 doppelgangers rushed back. Chapter 4496. Ji Tianqing's original body alone was enough to suppress the Prajna God Emperor. Together with one of his clones, they were enough to injure her. One could imagine how desperate the situation of the Prajna God Emperor would be when his 8 clones rushed back to join the battle. Ji Tianqing and his 9 clones joined forces to attack the Prajna God Emperor, making her seem even weaker and in imminent danger. This time, the Prajna God Emperor was truly in despair. Ji Tianqing attacked with a cold expression, not saying a single word, his eyes cold and emotionless. The Prajna God Emperor's heart was filled with boundless resentment and unwillingness, but she was unwilling to voice it out. She also pursed her lips and fought back with all her strength. But in the end, she was no match for Ji Tianqing and his 9 clones. She was beaten back again and again, constantly revealing openings, her injuries becoming more and more serious. Not long ago, she had told Ji Tianqing that she was an initial God Emperor and was in an invincible position. Even if Ji Tianqing could suppress her, he could not defeat her, much less kill her. But now, the situation was completely different, and the result would also be different. Facts had proven that common sense were useless when it came to Ji Tianqing. Another quarter of an hour passed. The Prajna God Emperor's injuries were extremely severe. Her body was covered in wounds, and her entire body was enveloped in multicolored light. A total of 64 Dao wounds covered her entire body, completely suppressing her strength. Her forehead was covered in cold sweat, her face was as pale as paper, and she began to pant in pain. Every time she circulated her divine power, every time she used a divine ability or secret art, it became more and more difficult. Her reactions became more and more sluggish, and her strength grew weaker and weaker. Finally, Ji Tianqing and his 9 clones joined forces and used a joint attack sword technique, stabbing the Prajna God Emperor with world-splitting sword radiances. Boom! With a deafening boom, her protective divine light completely shattered. 10 streaks of sword light pierced through her body at the same time, stabbing into her heart. PFFF, Prajna God Emperor's body was petrified. He froze on the spot and spat out a mouthful of blood. She had lost. In the end, he was defeated by Ji Tianqing's sword. Surging Taoist rhymes flooded into her body, sealing her god body and mind and wrapping around her godhead. The Prajna God Emperor was completely disheartened. Filled with unwillingness and resentment, he fainted. The 9 sword lights dissipated at the same time. The Prajna God Emperor also closed his eyes. His body slowly collapsed, falling into the ruins of the earth. However, Ji Tianqing used his mind to control the power of heaven and earth, condensing a pale white ripple of water to catch the unconscious Prajna God Emperor. She lay quietly on the ripples, no longer making any sound. Logically speaking, she was wearing a red dress and a purple cloak. Her entire body was drenched in blood, and her hair was disheveled. She should be in a sorry state and miserable state. But that was not the case. Amidst the ripples of water, even though she was lying unconscious, her posture was still graceful. The wounds on her body had not healed, but they were no longer bleeding. She was wrapped in a hazy 5-colored Taoist rhyme. The bloodstains on her body were fading away. Her entire body was enveloped in a 5-colored halo. Her cheeks were still as pale as paper, but she looked exceptionally peaceful. Whoosh! Ji Tianqing withdrew his 9 clones with a thought. Immediately, the 10 clones merged, and he was the only one left. He slowly walked forward, holding the sword of burial of heaven in his right hand. He walked up to the Prajna God Emperor. He looked down at the unconscious Prajna God Emperor from above. His cold face gradually relaxed, becoming calm and natural. Ever since he met the Prajna God Emperor, this was the first time he had seen the God Emperor in such a state. For some reason, he did not feel any joy or excitement in defeating the Prajna God Emperor. Instead, he felt somewhat conflicted. He silently gazed at the Prajna God Emperor, his mind filled with countless thoughts and memories. Looking at the 1,000-year-long experience he had with the Prajna God Emperor, the bits and pieces, everything that had happened, when summed up, was actually very simple. To sum it up in 4 words, it was love that gave birth to hate. Of course, that was the Prajna God Emperor's love for him. Apart from that, there was no other enmity between the two. It was also precisely because of this that even though Ji Tianqing had severely injured the Prajna God Emperor and knocked her unconscious, he did not feel the slightest sense of satisfaction or accomplishment from successfully taking revenge. After a long silence, he sighed and restrained his thoughts. His right hand slowly raised the sword of burial of heaven, pointing it at the Prajna God Emperor's forehead. That cinnabar-like red beam between her brows was still bright and beautiful. As long as he stabbed down with this sword, he would be able to pierce through her mind and shatter her divine spark. At that time, the Prajna God Emperor would definitely fall, and everything would come to an end. But the sword of burial of heaven remained suspended in the air. Although it did not tremble or hesitate, it did not move at all. After 10 breaths of time, Ji Tianqing sighed with a complicated expression, but in the end, he still withdrew the sword of burial of heaven. His hands formed a spell, forming the heavenly Tao seal, and he sent out 81 seals that enveloped the Prajna God Emperor's body. He sealed the Prajna God Emperor, placed her in the 9th level of the 9 heavens 10 absolutes pagoda, placed her in the endless sea of flames, and ignored her. Of course. He had only done this to seal the Prajna God Emperor. The Nirvana divine flame and the heaven burning flame would not burn her body and divine spark. After all, she was a God Emperor. Apart from directly destroying her divine spark, there was no other way to kill her. After sealing the Prajna God Emperor, Ji Tianqing once more used his arts to remove the heaven-destroying sword array and the heaven-sealing array. The ish. From the surrounding ruins, more than 300 divine lights flew out from the ground and gathered in front of Ji Tianqing. These were more than 300 high-grade king-level divine artifacts that he had used to set up the 2 arrays. When Ji Tianqing withdrew all the divine artifacts, the battlefield within a radius of 30,000 miles had become clear and bright. Between heaven and earth, only tens of thousands of miles of wasteland remained. He looked around, his expression indifferent, neither sad nor happy. He even felt a little lonely. He had already avenged the Prajna God Emperor. Next, he was prepared to leave the Kongming Temple's sphere of influence and seek revenge on the other 4 God Emperors. However, just as he was about to leave, he suddenly sensed something. He froze in place and slowly turned his head to the northwest. Even though, at the end of his gaze, there was only a hazy, blurry shadow of a mountain range. But his divine sense could sense that at the end of the 100,000 miles, there was a faint aura. That aura was like a pair of eyes, the eyes of heaven and earth, looking down on the vast earth. The previous battle, as well as his actions, were all clearly seen by those eyes. Ji Tianqing was on guard. He could naturally tell that the owner of that aura was definitely a God Emperor. Moreover, their strength far exceeded his, at least the middle level of the God Emperor. It's one of the temple lords of the Kongming Temple. Ji Tianqing immediately guessed the identity of that aura. The reason it was one of the temple lords was because he was sure that it was not the second temple lord. Back when he had disguised himself as Feiyang Shenwang and followed God King Qixia and the Prajna God Emperor to 7 Moon Mountain, he had seen the second temple lord with his own eyes and could recognize his aura. 7017K. Chapter 4497. Ji Tianqing had already guessed that the Prajna God Emperor couldn't join the Kongming Temple and left in a fit of anger. If the leader of the Kongming Temple wasn't stupid, he would definitely send a God Emperor-level Temple Lord to secretly follow the Prajna God Emperor. This Temple Lord would be responsible for pacifying the Seven Moon Mountain and dealing with the follow-up matters. He would also be able to suppress the Prajna God Emperor to prevent the Prajna God Emperor from taking revenge. Since he eliminated the second Temple Lord, Ji Tianqing guessed that the first Temple Lord wouldn't leave the Kongming Temple so easily. That left only the third Temple Lord, the fourth Temple Lord, and the fifth Temple Lord. The fifth Temple Lord was the youngest and his strength was relatively weak. Ji Tianqing believed that the most suitable candidates for the Kongming Temple should be the third Temple Lord and the fourth Temple Lord. Of course, according to the information he knew, both the third Temple Lord and the fourth Temple Lord were mid-level God Emperor and had condensed at least 4 Daoist rhymes. Ji Tianqing was able to defeat the Prajna God Emperor who had condensed 3 Daoist rhymes because he had set up a trap and ambush here more than 20 days in advance. In addition, the Prajna God Emperor's strength was relatively weak and he couldn't calm down when facing him, so there were always flaws and weaknesses. All of these reasons allowed him to defeat the Prajna God Emperor smoothly. However, facing the third Temple Lord or the fourth Temple Lord of the Kongming Temple, he had no chance of winning at all. Not to mention, he still didn't know exactly what the Hall Master that was hiding in the dark had come for. In any case, the other party didn't take the initiative to show up or attack, so Ji Tianqing didn't want to bother. He didn't have anything to do with the Kongming Temple, nor did he have any grudges, so there was no need to waste time. Swoosh! Ji Tianqing turned around and flew towards the southwest. He could travel 10,000 miles with a single step. However, when he turned and flew away, he sensed that the Temple Lord's aura was quickly approaching him. Every time the Temple Lord's aura flashed, he would travel 30,000 miles and teleport over. Ji Tianqing didn't know the other party's intentions, so of course he had to be vigilant and fly away quickly. He did not even hesitate to expend a large amount of divine power to teleport in the sky. Unfortunately, due to the restrictions of the Star of Origin, he could only teleport 10,000 miles away at most. As for the Hall Master who had yet to show himself, he could travel 30,000 miles with each teleportation. There was no suspense in the outcome. In a short span of 10 breaths, the Hall Master had caught up with Ji Tianqing. Shwa! With a flash of divine light, the fourth Hall Master crossed 30,000 miles and appeared in front of Ji Tianqing, blocking his path. Ji Tianqing knew that his opponent's speed was much faster than his. Even if he continued to fly in another direction, he would still be caught up. Thus, he simply stopped and stood in the sky. He maintained a distance of 1,000 miles from the other party and looked at him expressionlessly. The fourth Hall Master was a living being of the desolate race. He was more than 10 feet tall and his body was well proportioned and thin. His body was covered in dark golden scales, like a snake or a dragon. His shoulders were wide and his facial features were deep. There was a protruding horn on his forehead that looked like a diamond-shaped golden stone. It shimmered with a dark red glow. He was dressed in a dark purple gorgeous robe and wore a crown on his head. There was a 2-foot-long dagger hanging from his waist. Such obvious characteristics made it easy for people to recognize him. Ji Tianqing stared at him indifferently and took the initiative to ask, "Which Hall Master of the Kongming Temple are you?" The fourth Hall Master pricked up his eyebrows and his lips curled into a playful smile. He answered, "This Emperor is ranked 4th and is the 4th Hall Master that everyone speaks of. Since you have already guessed this Emperor's identity, I believe you should know why this Emperor is here." Ji Tianqing frowned and said in an indifferent tone, "How would this Emperor know what 4th Hall's intentions are?" This time, it was the 4th Hall Master's turn to frown. The smile on his lips turned into a sneer. He said, "Originally, the Pan-Ri God Emperor and her fleet joining our Kongming Temple was already set in stone. Who knew that there would be an accident midway, resulting in today's situation? If this Emperor did not guess wrongly, this should be your doing, right?" Ji Tianqing did not show it on the surface, but he was secretly surprised. The fourth Hall Master had been hiding in the distance, secretly observing the battle. Logically speaking, it was impossible for the fourth Hall Master to know the inside story. At most, he would think that he had a grudge with the Pan-Re God Emperor and had deliberately ambushed the Pan-Re God Emperor. But he did not expect that the Pan-Re God Emperor would be able to guess the inside story with just a few clues. It was truly shocking. Ji Tianqing said without changing his expression, Fourth Hall Master misunderstood. This emperor only had a grudge with the Pan-Re God Emperor and had set up an ambush to kill her. As for the Pan-Re fleet and the Kongming Temple, this emperor did not know about it and had never interfered. The sneer on the fourth Hall Master's face became even more pronounced. He said in a mocking tone, It's useless even if you deny it. You only feel that you have caused the deaths of so many people of the Seven Moon Mountain and the destruction of the Pan-Re fleet. You have ruined this hall's plans and are afraid of this hall's revenge. But the truth is that this emperor has appeared and did not attack you. I can even say so much to you. This proves that you do not need to worry. Ji Tianqing followed his words and continued, since Fourth Hall Master does not plan to make things difficult for this emperor, then forgive this emperor for not being able to accompany you. I will take my leave first. Sigh. Seeing that he was about to leave, the Fourth Hall Master took a step forward and extended his hand to block his path. He said with a smile, From the moment I saw you, this emperor felt that you and this hall were fated. Although your scheme caused the deaths of more than 10,000 people of the Seven Moon Mountain and the destruction of the Pan-Re fleet and ruined this hall's plans. But this emperor can promise you that this hall will not pursue your crimes. Not only that, this hall has always been benevolent and generous. We are willing to take in the elites of all races and nurture the heroes of the world. Especially for a talent like you, this hall is thirsty for talent. Actually, Ji Tianqing had already guessed the Fourth Hall Master's intentions when he did not make a move and did not mention the matter of taking revenge for the Qinyu Hall. He did not expect that he was right. The Fourth Hall Master actually wanted to recruit him into the Kongming Temple. Without waiting for the Fourth Hall Master to finish speaking, Ji Tianqing waved his hand and interrupted him, saying, Fourth Hall Master, you misunderstand. This emperor's talent is mediocre and does not have any fate with the Kongming Temple. Fourth Hall Master, please do not waste time on this emperor. This emperor has already made up his mind. Also, if Fourth Hall Master is worried that this emperor's activities here will threaten the Kongming Temple's interests, then this emperor will leave and will never appear in the Kongming Temple's sphere of influence again. Ji Tianqing had already seen that the Kongming Temple appeared to be benevolent and virtuous on the surface and seemed to be pure. In reality, the Kongming Temple did not lack schemes and all kinds of tyrannical methods. He did not want to tangle with the Kongming Temple, so he decisively refused. However, the Fourth Hall Master would not let him go so easily. He chuckled and said, Your talent is mediocre. A mere God Emperor initial stage cultivator who has only condensed one Taoist rhyme was actually able to defeat the Pan-Re God Emperor who has condensed 3 Taoist rhymes. You alone used schemes and tricks to not only ruin the plans of the Pan-Re God Emperor and this hall, but also destroy the entire Pan-Re fleet. Young man, if your talent is mediocre, then there are no geniuses in this world. Chapter 4498. Originally, Ji Tianqing thought that the Kongming Temple had gone to great lengths to get the Prajna God Emperor and her fleet to join them in order to expand their influence. After all, there were several temple forces on the planet of origin, and there might be competition and conflict between them. Not only the Kongming Temple, but every temple might be thinking of ways to increase their influence. But now, the Prajna God Emperor had been defeated and sealed, and the Prajna fleet had been completely wiped out. Not only did the Fourth Temple Master not deal with the main culprit, but he also had the intention of subduing him. This made Ji Tianqing wonder if the Kongming Temple had first taken in the Prajna God Emperor, and now wanted to subdue him. Was it to expand their influence, or did they have other motives? Thinking of this, Ji Tianqing did not hide and asked directly. The Kongming Temple subduing the Prajna God Emperor is easy to understand. After all, the Prajna God Emperor's strength is not ordinary, and she has 100,000 soldiers under her command. They have very strong fighting power. But I am alone. I wonder why the fourth temple master has invited me to join the Kongming Temple. After thinking about it, I can't be of much use to the Kongming Temple, right? The fourth temple master chuckled and said, since you have thought of this question, it means that we have the possibility of reaching a consensus. Although the Prajna God Emperor and her fleet are indeed my number one target. But I did not take her in just to expand my influence. In my eyes, a monstrous genius like you is far more important than her and her fleet. Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and looked calmly at the fourth temple master. He said, but you still haven't told me why you invited me to join the Kongming Temple. The fourth temple master knew that an expert like Ji Tianqing was very scheming and shrewd, and it was impossible to gain his trust with a few words. Instead of boasting, it was better to be honest and direct. Perhaps it would be more effective. Thinking of this, the fourth palace master stopped smiling and said seriously, to be honest, I have been looking for creatures with outstanding talent, regardless of race. As long as it was a genius with extraordinary talent, it would be possible to help the Kongming Temple. As for what you can help me with and why you can help me, I can't answer that question. Only after you join the Kongming Temple will these secrets be revealed to you. Of course, you will be treated the same as the Prajna God Emperor. The temple will confer you the title of Sixth Hall Master. There was no doubt that the fourth palace master's words and attitude were sincere. He also sincerely wanted Ji Tianqing to join the Kongming Temple. Ji Tianqing also believed that what the fourth palace master said was true. But he just wanted to know what kind of problem the Kongming Temple was facing that they needed help. The secret mentioned by the fourth palace master seemed to be somewhat mysterious and important, which also interested him. But the fourth palace master said that if he wanted to know these secrets, he had to join the Kongming Temple. Therefore, Ji Tianqing would rather not explore these secrets and problems than join the Kongming Temple. Sorry, since you are not willing to tell me the reason, I can only assume that you are not sincere. An invitation without sincerity is naturally not attractive at all. Ji Tianqing believed that the fourth palace master would keep the secret and would not easily reveal it, so he used this as an excuse to reject him. Sure enough, the fourth palace master's face was a little gloomy, and his eyes flashed with cold light. I've already shown you enough sincerity and promised you the corresponding status and treatment. But I didn't expect you to be so stubborn. It seems that you don't take me seriously. Ji Tianqing's lips curled into a cold smile as he said, what? If the soft approach doesn't work, you use the hard approach. If the negotiation doesn't work, you want to fight. You finally show your true colors. The fourth palace master snorted coldly, and his whole body surged with a power that could shake the heavens and earth, as well as a surging pressure. You are the one who refused a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. I gave you face, but you didn't want it. Since this is the case, I can only defeat you and take you back to the temple. As the fourth palace master's voice fell, endless divine power surged out of his body and spread in all directions, connecting hundreds of thousands of miles of heaven and earth. Suddenly, his robe fluttered, and the surrounding tens of thousands of miles of heaven and earth were blown up. The majestic divine power of heaven and earth quickly condensed and increased in power, forming an invisible giant hand and fiercely suppressing Ji Tianqing. The fourth palace master was confident of his status and would not draw his sword right away. Instead, he first displayed the power of the middle level of the God Emperor to intimidate Ji Tianqing and force him to admit defeat. Even though the fourth palace master said that Ji Tianqing was the only one he had seen in his life, and could be called a monstrous genius. But in reality, he still underestimated Ji Tianqing's strength. From the beginning, Ji Tianqing had made up his mind not to fight the fourth palace master to the death, but to find a way to get rid of him. So, on the surface, he was negotiating with the fourth palace master, but in reality, he was stalling for time and secretly accumulating power. When the fourth palace master controlled the divine power of heaven and earth and accumulated a huge amount of divine power of heaven and earth to suppress him, he turned and fled without hesitation. So close, yet so far. Forced by the situation, Ji Tianqing used the power that he had accumulated to the peak and borrowed the power of heaven and earth to use a divine power secret technique that he had recently developed. Ever since he returned the five elements world to its original position and the three stars returned to their original positions, not only did he break through to the God Emperor realm, but his body also underwent a huge change. The most intuitive feeling was that he could easily merge with any star in the world. Secondly, he could smoothly use the power of heaven and earth to unleash power that far exceeded those of the same level. This divine power, called so close, yet so far, was a concealment technique that he had recently developed. When this technique was used, he could instantly change his position and borrow the power of heaven and earth to teleport. The shortest distance was 80,000 to 100,000 miles, and the longest distance was hundreds of thousands of miles. On the surface, it sounded very similar to the teleportation that the God Kings were used to. But teleportation relied on the divine power of space. The space on the star of origin was too firm, and God Kings could not teleport here. Only the God Emperor could do it, and there was a limit to the distance. Ji Tianqing's self-created move, so close, yet so far, so far was different. He did not borrow the power of space, but used a method similar to burrowing underground to teleport 100,000 miles away in an instant. Swish! Before the fourth palace master's accumulated divine power of heaven and earth descended, Ji Tianqing's body flashed with golden light and disappeared from the spot. The next moment, he appeared on a mountain peak 100,000 miles away. The fourth palace master, who was full of confidence and majesty just a moment ago, was dumbfounded. He could not believe his eyes. An initial God Emperor who had condensed one Taoist rhyme could teleport 100,000 miles away. Even he, an expert in the Middle God Emperor realm, could not do it. This was too unbelievable. The fourth palace master was stunned for a moment. His heart was filled with shock, and his eyes widened. However, he quickly reacted and suppressed his shock. He hurriedly teleported to chase after Ji Tianqing. While he was teleporting, he was thinking to himself, I didn't see wrongly. This lad is indeed a one-in-a-million peerless genius. No matter what, I will make him work for the temple. Chapter 4499. Ji Tianqing had defeated the Prajna God Emperor and destroyed the Prajna fleet. Now, he had shown such amazing talent and means, which shocked the fourth palace master even more. At the same time, the fourth palace master was even more determined to bring Ji Tianqing back to the Kongming temple, even if he had to be tied up. The people that the Kongming temple was looking for should be extraordinary, exceptional, and outstanding. Previously, the Kongming temple had recruited the Prajna God Emperor and the Prajna fleet because the Kongming temple wanted to see if the Prajna God Emperor was a suitable candidate. Also, the Kongming temple was willing to spend more time to find a target from the 100,000 soldiers of the Prajna fleet. But Ji Tianqing's appearance made the fourth palace master feel that the Prajna God Emperor and his 100,000 soldiers were not very valuable. Compared to Ji Tianqing, the Prajna God Emperor and his 100,000 soldiers were not the target they were looking for. Only Ji Tianqing met their criteria. Swoosh! Swoosh! The fourth palace master quickly teleported in the sky, and every time his figure flashed, he would cross 30,000 miles, chasing after Ji Tianqing. Although Ji Tianqing had used imminent skyline to open up a distance of 100,000 miles, he had used imminent skyline. But he had used imminent skyline once, which consumed a lot of his divine power, and he could not use it again in a short period of time. Moreover, the fourth palace master's teleportation speed was faster than his. As time passed, the distance between the two narrowed. If the situation continued, the fourth palace master would soon catch up with him. Soon, 20 breaths of time passed. The fourth palace master gradually caught up with Ji Tianqing, and the distance between the two was less than 1,000 miles. The fourth palace master was about to attack and use his secret technique again. Even if he could not hurt Ji Tianqing, he had to slow him down and make him stay. At the critical moment, Ji Tianqing once again unleashed his power and used imminent skyline. Swoosh! With a flash of divine light, Ji Tianqing disappeared on the spot. In the next instant, he teleported another 100,000 miles away and appeared 100,000 miles away in the south. The fourth palace master frowned as a cold light flashed in his eyes. His face became even more serious. Ji Tianqing being able to execute so close, yet poles apart once was already out of his expectations. Now, Ji Tianqing was able to perform this divine ability twice in a short span of 20 breaths. This was beyond the fourth hall master's expectations. This also allowed him to see Ji Tianqing's endless potential and talent. This emperor is already 60 to 70% sure. Perhaps the person our Kongming temple is looking for is a monster like him. The fourth palace master was not sure if Ji Tianqing was the person they were looking for. However, he was certain that the gifted and peerless genius that the Kongming temple was looking for must be someone like Ji Tianqing. Therefore, he continued to maintain his speed of 30,000 miles per step and chased after Ji Tianqing to the south. At the same time, he did not forget to take out his communication jade slip and reply to the first palace master. The content of the message was very simple. First, he reported the whereabouts of the Prajna God Emperor and his fleet. Then, he focused on describing Ji Tianqing. In fact, after the fourth palace master arrived at Mount Seven Moons, he did not show up at all. He did not make any deployment or arrangements before leaving Mount Seven Moons. He had been secretly following the Prajna fleet, hoping to see the Prajna God Emperor return to the fleet before returning to Mount Seven Moons to make his deployment. However, he did not expect to be pleasantly surprised. He actually saw Ji Tianqing ambushing the Prajna God Emperor along the way. Therefore, in his report to the first palace master, the content of Mount Seven Moons was very brief. The main content was to describe Ji Tianqing's monstrous talent. The fourth palace master believed that after the first palace master read the message, he would definitely attach great importance to Ji Tianqing. He would definitely send more experts to assist him and capture Ji Tianqing back to the Kongming temple. Soon, the two of them chased for another 30 breaths of time. The two of them had already flown 1,000,000 miles away, far away from the previous battlefield. When Ji Tianqing was flying over a forest, the fourth palace master caught up with him again. He was only 1,000 miles away from him. This time, the fourth palace master was full of anticipation. He wanted to see if Ji Tianqing could use clothes at worlds apart a third time. If Ji Tianqing's performance was even more monstrous, he would be certain that Ji Tianqing might be the person the Kongming temple was looking for. However, Ji Tianqing had already used clothes at worlds apart twice in a row. He had used up a lot of his divine power and his divine body had reached its limit. If he used clothes at worlds apart again, he could still barely use it. However, his divine body and godhead would not have any buffer space and would definitely be damaged. He knew very well that it would be very difficult to get rid of the fourth palace master. Next, there would probably be a fierce battle between the two of them to get out of this predicament. Therefore, Ji Tianqing did not use close at worlds apart again. Instead, he stopped decisively and used absolute shadows to surround the fourth palace master. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. A dazzling divine light flashed and 9 doppelgangers appeared. Together with Ji Tianqing's original body, there were a total of 10 figures scattered in the sky and formed an encirclement. Without any superfluous words, Ji Tianqing and his 9 doppelgangers cast spells at the same time and formed a battle formation. They controlled the power of heaven and earth to suppress the 4th Palace Master. Moreover, the 10 figures used absolute swordsmanship skills at the same time and drowned the 4th Palace Master's figure with sword light that filled the sky. The 4th Palace Master had expected that Ji Tianqing would not be able to escape from his grasp and would definitely be forced to stop fighting. However, he did not expect Ji Tianqing to have such a trick up his sleeve. He could actually create 9 doppelgangers and fight together with him. The 9 doppelgangers were exactly the same and had half of the original body's strength. This was simply unbelievable. Originally, it was Ji Tianqing fighting the 4th Palace Master alone. In this way, it was equivalent to 5 of him fighting together. While the 4th Palace Master was casting mysterious spells and using the power of heaven and earth to resist Ji Tianqing's encirclement, he thought to himself, the doppelganger technique is very common and is usually only used by divine gods and divine emperors. After reaching the divine king realm, everyone would try to refine doppelgangers. For someone like him who has cultivated the doppelganger technique to the extreme, there is actually another use. It can increase his combat power by several times. This man is indeed monstrous. I have to take him seriously. Otherwise, I might really fail miserably and let him escape. Ji Tianqing's various performances made the 4th Palace Master more cautious when dealing with him. Previously, the 4th Palace Master thought that using 60 to 70% of his power would be enough to defeat Ji Tianqing. But now, it seemed that he could not be careless. He still had to use his full strength. Bang! 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 The absolute swordsmanship used by the 2 sides collided fiercely in the sky. There was a deafening sound and a shockwave that could destroy heaven and earth. Countless divine light fragments with a terrifying impact spread in all directions and razed the surrounding mountains and rivers to the ground. In the first 10 moves, Ji Tianqing and the 9 doppelgangers attacked and retreated together. The absolute swordsmanship that they used was the same. The power was indeed very strong. However, he found a flaw. The 4th Palace Master's strength was very strong and his insight was very strong. He quickly saw the flaw and found a way to deal with it. Chapter 4500. Ji Tianqing had always thought that the Star of Origin had been peaceful for tens of thousands of years. The experts of the various temples rarely had the chance to engage in a large-scale battle. They all lacked combat experience. In fact, it was true, especially the Sir Gods and King Gods of the Divine Halls. They were indeed lacking in battle experience. However, for a God Emperor like the 4th Hall Master, battle experience did not have much of an impact on the outcome. In particular, the 4th Hall Master had the advantage of suppressing him in terms of cultivation level, which reduced the impact of his lack of battle experience even more. He and the 4th Hall Master had exchanged 10 moves, but they were still unable to defeat the 4th Hall Master. It was a tie. Therefore, Ji Tianqing decisively changed his strategy. He was multitasking. His original body performed various divine powers and secret skills while his 9 doppelgangers performed different sword principle unique skills at the same time. Suddenly, the battle scene became even more dazzling. Hundreds of divine powers and secret skills emerged one after another. It was too much for the eyes to take in. The 4th Hall Master was obviously stunned for a moment. Then, his eyes lit up with surprise and joy. The more extraordinary Ji Tianqing's performance was, the more amazing his talent was, the more excited he was. Because he was more and more certain that Ji Tianqing was the target they were looking for. Of course, despite his excitement, the 4th Hall Master did not let his guard down. He became even more cautious. Sky-bearing form, rise. The 4th Hall Master did not use any divine weapons. He only used his hands to perform a spell to control the divine power of heaven and earth and release various divine path unique skills. Under his control, the endless divine power of heaven and earth merged with the pressure of Heaven Wei to form various sword shadows, wind, fire, and lightning that continuously attacked Ji Tianqing. The sword principal divine powers that the 9 doppelgangers performed were all defeated by the 4th Hall Master. They turned into endless divine light fragments and scattered between heaven and earth. Even the divine powers and secret skills performed by Ji Tianqing's original body were quickly dissolved by the 4th Hall Master and dissipated between heaven and earth. As time passed, the two of them exchanged more and more moves. The 4th Hall Master also had a better understanding of Ji Tianqing's battle style and divine powers and secret skills. He fought 1 against 10, but he was always methodical and did not panic at all. No matter how Ji Tianqing changed his battle formation and used various divine powers and secret skills, he could not defeat the 4th Hall Master. After an hour, Ji Tianqing and the 4th Hall Master had exchanged thousands of moves. Apart from a few secret skills of divine powers and secret skills, he had used almost all of his divine powers. In the end, he and his 9 doppelgangers had exhausted a large amount of divine power, but the 4th Palace Master was still safe and sound. Ji Tianqing was anxious. He knew that he could not delay any longer. Otherwise, not only would he not be able to defeat the 4th Palace Master, he would also be dragged down by the 4th Palace Master. In terms of strength, foundation, divine power, and control of the power of heaven and earth, he was indeed inferior to the 4th Hall Master. He of heaven 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 to he to of God of heaven 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 of heaven 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 of heaven and earth. He had always been good at both offense and defense. While he was in an invincible position, he was constantly pressuring the Ji Tianqing clan. He was not in a hurry to defeat Ji Tianqing. He would rather stall for time, even if he had to fight for 3 days and 3 nights. Because he wanted to see how much potential Ji Tianqing had that had not been stimulated, how many trump cards and tricks he had, and how many surprises he could bring him. Taking a step back, even if he couldn't defeat Ji Tianqing quickly, he could still use his nearly limitless divine power to drag Ji Tianqing to the point of exhaustion. At that time, Ji Tianqing would be at his mercy. Moreover, this was the territory of the Kongming Temple. The 4th Hall Master had already reported the news to the 1st Hall Master. He believed that the temple would soon send more experts to support. Even if there was an accident in the fight between him and Ji Tianqing escaped temporarily, he did not have to worry. All in all, the 4th Hall Master was in an invincible position and had complete control of the situation. Ji Tianqing had not been defeated yet, but he and his 9 doppelgangers could not hold on for too long. He had to make changes and respond quickly before his power weakened. Therefore, he used his Taoist rhyme and borrowed the divine power of Heaven Wei to launch his strongest attack on the 4th Hall Master. Rising Dragon Slash. Ji Tianqing held the Sword of Burial of Heaven with both hands and activated the Taoist rhyme that he had accumulated throughout his life. He slashed out a giant 5-colored sword that was 10,000 feet long. This sword contained thousands of great Tao precepts and endless divine power of Heaven Wei. The 9 doppelgangers cooperated with him and used their sword Tao superpower to block the 4th Hall Master. The 4th Hall Master could not dodge and could only face this dazzling giant sword head-on. Although the 4th Hall Master was very powerful, he felt threatened by this giant 5-colored sword. If he did not block and resolve it, he would be severely injured after being hit by the giant 5-colored sword. At this critical moment, the 4th Hall Master did not dare to be careless. He decisively chose to use his natal divine weapon. Swoosh! He raised his eyebrows and the diamond-shaped golden horn on his forehead shone with golden light. It quickly separated from his body and turned into a 3 feet tall bell that floated above his head. The dark golden bell had a simple and unadorned design. It contained an ancient and boundless aura and a rich divine power of Heaven Wei. Facing this bell was like facing a god emperor. It was more like seeing the messenger and incarnation of the heavenly way. The bell was only a divine weapon, but it was an emperor-level divine weapon that could replace the divine power of Heaven Way. This was the fourth Hall Master's natal divine weapon, the celestial bell that he had nurtured for more than 20,000 years. Wine. Under the fourth Hall Master's control, the celestial bell suddenly expanded to a radius of 10 feet. It shone with a sacred golden light and enveloped him. At this moment, the fourth Hall Master's figure appeared very tall and majestic. Kaboom! In the next moment, the giant five-colored sword that could split heaven and earth struck the celestial bell. There was an earth-shattering sound that shook the heavens and the earth. Ji Tianqing's pupils shrank as a shocking scene appeared. The celestial bell did not move at all. The sacred golden light shield was also unscathed. As for the fourth Hall Master, who was protected by the celestial bell, he was unscathed. One of Ji Tianqing's most powerful killing moves could not even shake the fourth Hall Master's natal divine weapon. This was one of the reasons why the fourth Hall Master was invincible. Rumble, in the dull sound, the giant five-colored sword that was tens of thousands of feet long broke into several pieces. However, it still cut through the sky and tore a huge black gap. That black gap that was thousands of miles long was the spatial crack that lay between Ji Tianqing and the fourth Hall Master. The fourth Hall Master stood where he was unscathed and did not move an inch. Ji Tianqing, on the other hand, was blasted away by the powerful recoil and flew tens of thousands of miles away. Of course, he did not expect this divine skill to hurt the fourth Hall Master. He took the opportunity to turn around and escape. He also recalled his 9 doppelgangers. Thus, the battle between the two of them stopped. Then, it became Ji Tianqing running in front while the fourth Hall Master chased after him at a moderate pace. Chapter 45:01. While the fourth Hall Master was hunting down Ji Tianqing, the fourth Hall Master's message jade slip returned to the Kongming Temple and fell into the hands of the first Hall Master. Half a day ago, the fourth Hall Master sent a message to the first Hall Master, reporting that he had arrived at the Seven Moon Mountain and was ready to take over the Qingyu Hall's affairs. After reading the message jade slip, the first Hall Master told the other Hall Masters that the fourth Hall Master had arrived at the Seven Moon Mountain. The other Hall Masters were waiting for the next news, wanting to see how the fourth Hall Master would deal with the Qingyu Hall and the Prajna God Emperor. Half a day later, the fourth Hall Master sent back a message. However, the first Hall Master's expression changed immediately after reading the message, and his eyes flashed with a dazzling light. Obviously, the first Hall Master did not expect that a primordial God Emperor would appear out of nowhere. Moreover, it was the primordial God Emperor who had schemed to sow discord between the Qingyu Hall and the Prajna God Emperor, which had led to this war. Not only had the Kongming Temple's plan been foiled, but the Qingyu Hall and the Prajna fleet had also suffered heavy losses. In the end, the primordial God Emperor had even set up an ambush for the Prajna God Emperor and destroyed the Prajna fleet. Without the fourth Hall Master's reminder, the first Hall Master had immediately realized that the primordial God Emperor was a monster and a very dangerous person. Moreover, the fourth Hall Master had given a detailed description of the primordial God Emperor. The first Hall Master agreed with the fourth Hall Master's words and actions. No matter what, they had to bring the primordial God Emperor into the Kongming Temple. The second Hall Master, the third Hall Master, and the fifth Hall Master also knew that the fourth Hall Master had sent back a message, but the first Hall Master did not respond. Therefore, the 3 Hall Masters released their divine senses at the same time to communicate with the first Hall Master and ask about the situation. First Hall Master, what did the fourth Hall Master say in the message just sent back? Fourth brother has already arrived at Seven Moon Mountain. It's only been half a day, and he's already finished dealing with the matters of Qingyu Hall. Qingyu Hall's affairs are simple. The key is, did the Prajna God Emperor return to the fleet as promised and leave with her fleet? Given the Prajna God Emperor's temperament, I'm afraid he won't be willing to leave and will most likely seek revenge. I think the fourth palace master's message is most likely related to this matter. The other palace masters asked the first palace master what had happened, and they all expressed their worries. The first palace master did not hide anything from everyone. He told the three palace masters about the contents of the communication jade slip. After the three hall masters heard the story, they were filled with excitement and disbelief. At the same time, they were also excited. There was no need for the first hall master to comment, as the three hall masters could not help but discuss. No wonder the Qin Hall and the Prajna fleet had a conflict and eventually reached the point of no return. So it was the primordial god emperor's plot. The primordial god emperor had a grudge against the Prajna god emperor, but he was able to endure it and use the Qin Hall to take revenge on the Prajna fleet. He's really insidious and cunning. He's just an initial god emperor with only one Taoist connotation, but he defeated the Prajna god emperor with 3 Taoist connotations and escaped from the fourth palace master's hands. It's incredible. The primordial god emperor is not only extraordinarily talented, but also has profound shrewdness and wisdom. He's indeed a rare genius. Although that guy ruined our plan and caused great losses to the Qin Hall, I agree with the fourth palace master's decision. We can't kill that guy. No matter what, we have to bring that guy back to the temple and use him for our own use. If our analysis and judgment are correct, that primordial god emperor is very likely the person we're looking for. That's right. Previously, we tried our best to win over the Prajna god emperor because we saw the Prajna god emperor's talent and aptitude. Together with the 100,000 soldiers under her command, we might be able to cultivate a peerless genius in the future. But now, it seems that the Prajna god emperor and her soldiers are far inferior to this primordial god emperor. First Hall Master, this emperor is willing to lead elite experts to support the fourth palace master and pursue that primordial god emperor. That guy is too cunning. It's better for us to split up and work together. It's safer. The hall masters discussed for a while and quickly reached a consensus. They all wanted to lead troops to surround Ji Tianqing. The first hall master weighed the pros and cons for a while before finally making a decision and issuing the order. The 3 of you, each take 1,000 Divine King Realm Guards and split up into 3 groups to support the fourth palace master. This emperor only has one request. You must capture that guy. Furthermore, you must capture him alive. The 3 hall masters' spirits were shaken. They complied without hesitation. Subsequently, the 3 hall masters did not delay any longer. They all went to gather the troops and started the operation. In less than 15 minutes, the 3 hall masters were all ready. They each led 1,000 elites and left the Kongming mystic realm one after another. They all boarded the divine ship and rushed south at the fastest speed. While flying and hurrying, the 3 hall masters did not forget to contact the fourth palace master to inquire about his location and movements. Ji Tianqing and the fourth palace master's pursuit in the vast heaven and earth continued for half a day without ending. The fourth palace master's speed of teleportation was much faster than Ji Tianqing's. Therefore, every once in a while, the fourth palace master could catch up with Ji Tianqing and unleash a fierce attack on him. And Ji Tianqing could always change his tricks and use all kinds of magical abilities and methods to shake off the fourth palace master's suppression. In this half a day's time, both sides clashed 9 times. Although Ji Tianqing could not shake off the fourth palace master's pursuit from beginning to end, he also had a deeper understanding of the fourth palace master's strength realm. He already accurately grasped that the fourth palace master was at the middle stage of the God Emperor realm. He had condensed 4 Dao runes. As for the divine Dao laws that the fourth palace master grasped, the number was around 1,500. Ji Tianqing only condensed 1 Dao rune. But he could last so long under the fourth palace master's hands. It was because he grasped 1,800 kinds of divine Dao laws. Ever since he broke through to the God Emperor realm, he would have new comprehensions every once in a while. His perception of heaven and earth would become deeper, and he comprehended even more divine Tao laws. He calculated in his heart that if he could condense another Tao rune, even if it was only 2 Tao runes, he could contend with the 4th Palace Master and not fall into a disadvantage. Or perhaps, if he could grasp 2,000 kinds of divine Tao laws, he would also have a chance to shake off the 4th Palace Master's pursuit. Unfortunately, these 2 conditions could not be achieved in a short period of time. In addition, the Sword of Burial of Heaven was only a Supreme King-level divine weapon, while the 4th Palace Master's Celestial Globe Bell was a genuine Emperor-level divine weapon. This was also one of the factors that widened the gap between the two. If it was not for Ji Tianqing's extraordinary talent that allowed him to easily merge with heaven, earth, and stars, and was not suppressed by the divine might of the heavens, he would have been defeated by the 4th Palace Master long ago. Even so, after continuously chasing and fleeing for half a day, he was exhausted, and his divine power was greatly depleted. On the other hand, the 4th Palace Master was still unhurried and methodical, and he had a well-thought-out attitude. In his eyes, Ji Tianqing was already a turtle in a jar and could not escape even if he had wings. Chapter 4502. The 4th Palace Master was not in a hurry because he was confident that he could suppress Ji Tianqing. Moreover, he had just received news that the 1st Palace Master had sent out 3 Palace Masters, each leading 1,000 elites, to reinforce him. Although the 4th Palace Master had guessed that the 3 Palace Masters might want to take the credit, it was not important. They could surround Ji Tianqing from different directions and cut off Ji Tianqing's escape route. That was the most important thing. It was evening, and the sky was dark. Ji Tianqing was flying over a misty lake, and the 4th Palace Master was following closely behind him. They were less than 1,000 miles apart. The 4th Palace Master was about to use his divine skill again to attack Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing had been running for half a day, and he was exhausted. His face was pale. He had used up too much of his divine power, and he only had about 70% of his combat power left. He was gradually weakening. He knew that he could not delay any longer with the 4th Palace Master. He had to show enough determination to get rid of the 4th Palace Master completely. Therefore, before the 4th Palace Master attacked, he decisively opened the space tunnel to Jiutian 10 Absolute's tower. Swoosh! Swoosh! In the next moment, Yun Yao, Ji Ku, Bai Feng, Yank, and the others turned into divine lights and flew out. Other than Yun Yao and Ji Ku, who were peak divine kings, the other 22 were all upper divine kings. Among the 22 upper divine kings, there were his friends and family, and there were also followers from the god realm. When they appeared in the sky, they instantly formed a battle formation and joined forces to attack the 4th Palace Master. At the same time, Ji Tianqing also used the 10 directional vanishing shadows to create 9 clones and joined forces with the others to attack the 4th Palace Master. Previously, when he fought against the Prajna God Emperor, destroyed the Prajna fleet, and was chased by the 4th Palace Master, he was still alone. In fact, Yun Yao and Ji Ku already knew about his situation. They had been worried about his safety and wanted to fight alongside him several times. However, he was worried about everyone's safety, so he never agreed. After all, this was a battle between God-Emperor powerhouses. It would be extremely dangerous for God-kings like them to participate. The slightest carelessness could cost them their lives. But things were different now. Ji Tianqing was unable to get rid of the 4th Palace Master. He had to decisively deal a heavy blow to the 4th Palace Master in order to have a chance to get rid of him. Everyone joined forces with him to fight. They had already discussed a strategy and formed the 9 Suns heaven-burning battle formation with great tacit understanding. Ji Tianqing was the killing machine of the battle formation. Everyone helped him gather strength and enhance his power at all costs. At the same time, he also used the ultimate skill of the celestial dragon tyrant body. He turned into a golden giant that was tens of thousands of feet tall and attacked the fourth palace master in the most ferocious way. The celestial dragon tyrant body increased his combat power by 8 times and could last for an hour. With everyone joining forces to form a formation, his battle prowess was doubled. In other words, he was currently in his strongest state, where his combat power was increased by 10 times. If he still could not defeat the fourth hall master, then he did not have much hope. Sword breaking the 9 heavens. Ji Tianqing, who was tens of thousands of feet tall, held the giant burial of heaven sword with both hands. He roared and slashed out a giant sword that was hundreds of miles long. This sword was extremely violent. It even contained 1,200 types of laws and divine power, as well as Ji Tianqing's condensed Taoist rhyme. The fourth palace master was stunned for a moment. His pupils constricted as shock flashed across his eyes. He had always thought that Ji Tianqing acted alone without any followers or partners. After all, Ji Tianqing did not have any partners when he fought against the Hanya fleet previously. He did not expect that 24 God King powerhouses would suddenly appear beside him and form a formation with such tacit understanding. Even though the 24 God King powerhouses could not pose a threat to the fourth palace master. Even the 2 peak divine kings with the strongest strength could not possibly injure him either. But the 24 God Kings joined forces and helped Ji Tianqing greatly increase his combat power. At this moment, the fourth palace master also felt a great threat and a warning sign appeared in his heart. He stopped in his tracks without hesitation and took out the armillary bell to protect himself. He waved his hands and formed hand seals, creating a sky full of sword and saber light. Kaboom! In the next moment, a deafening loud noise exploded. Ji Tianqing's giant sword slashed through the sky full of sword and saber light and slashed the armillary bell that was flickering with divine light. The outcome was not surprising. The Emperor-level divine artifact, armillary bell, actually had its divine light shattered and a deep dent was left on the bell. The violent and unparalleled power sent the armillary bell flying tens of thousands of miles away, crashing into the edge of the huge lake. Suddenly, the dozens of mountain peaks by the lake were destroyed within a radius of 20,000 miles. The lake's surface stirred up huge waves. The surging lake water quickly flooded the ruins within 20,000 miles, causing the lake's surface to expand. After the armillary bell was sent flying, it was damaged and could not return to the fourth palace master's hands in a short period of time. The fourth palace master was shocked and could only find it hard to believe. He stared at Ji Tianqing with his eyes wide open. If he had not experienced it himself, he would never have believed that the other party, with the strength of an initial god emperor, could damage his natal divine artifact. But Ji Tianqing did not give him a chance to think, sigh or take back the armillary bell. Without any pause, Ji Tianqing swung the Sword of Burial of Heaven and used the second divine power. Sword of Apocalypse. As he roared, he crazily absorbed the power of the 5 elements world. With the most powerful world power, mixed with the divine power of 1,200 laws and his Taoist rhymes, he slashed with the sword. Although he was on the planet of origin and the 5 elements world was far away in the void of the universe, he had already merged with the 5 elements world. However, he had long since merged with the 5 elements world. The two coexisted, and their powers could be used together. This did not make sense and even went against the rules of the heavenly way. But for some reason, this was the reality and the heavenly way did not seem to have any abnormalities. Swoosh! The Sword of Apocalypse that condensed Ji Tianqing's most powerful power was the most powerful killing move that he had created by comprehending the Heaven Punishment Array. At this moment, Ji Tianqing's combat power had reached its peak. The sword strike he had unleashed could be said to be the strongest strike of his life. The 100-mile-long Sword of Apocalypse shone with dazzling 5-colored divine light. It locked on to the fourth palace master and also sealed the surrounding space. The fourth palace master was shocked and felt a strong sense of death. But he could not teleport or retreat in time. Without the protection of the armillary bell, he panicked. Seeing the sword of Apocalypse descending from the sky, he could only take out a dozen Supreme King-level divine artifacts. They surrounded him and emitted the most dazzling light. Those divine artifacts of different shapes and sizes unleashed their most powerful power and formed a thick divine light shield to protect the fourth palace master. Kaboom! In the next moment, the sword of Apocalypse slashed the fourth palace master with the power to destroy everything. The divine light shield that protected him was instantly shattered into pieces, and countless fragments of divine light burst out. The power of the sword of Apocalypse was greatly reduced. It then hit the fourth palace master and sent him flying 30,000 miles away. He fell into the lake with blood spurting out of his 7 orifices. You're tuning in to the Han Lee's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.